Chapter 375. The horn that Duokong carried with him was a gift from a small tribesman who lived in the forest when the tribe first arrived here a few hundred years ago. The tribesmen were skilled in crafting, and they were good at making things out of beast horns and bones, including horns. In this field, even the slave masters might not be able to compete with them. The one who received the gift was the leader of the hunting team in the Yanjiao tribe. Because the horn sound was very strange, it sounded like the roar of a very powerful predator in the forest, so it was not used often. Someone once said that this kind of horn sound could scare away many beasts in the forest. Although the horn was not big, it was made of excellent quality. Hundreds of years had passed, except for some scratches, there was no other damage on it. That was because there were other wooden or leather whistles that worked during hunting. Later on, this horn was specially used to signal an emergency, especially when it was a big event related to the tribe. The horn was passed down from one hunting team leader to another. Since Duokong took over as the leader of the hunting team, the tribe was relatively peaceful. Even if there were some small problems, they would be solved by the warriors in time. There were no big problems that affected the tribe, so the horn was not used. But now he took out this horn. Woo, the palm-sized black horn suddenly made a sound like the roar of a beast in the forest, and the sound broke the peaceful atmosphere of the tribe. After the group hunting, many people were busy dealing with the prey they had hunted. When they heard the sound of the horn, most of them didn't realize what was going on. Only some of the older ones, who had experienced the previous hunting team leader blowing the horn, reacted when they heard the sound of the horn. They had not heard it for many years, and now that they heard it for the first time they felt a sense of disbelief. They wondered if their ears were playing tricks on them. But when they saw the serious faces of the others, and some were so scared that their faces turned pale, they knew that it was not their imagination. It was indeed the special horn that belonged to the hunting team leader. It sounded again. In the past, when this kind of horn sound appeared, it usually meant a fight or a massacre. The young warriors and children were a little confused, but the elders did not hesitate to stop what they were doing. They asked everyone to put aside what they were doing for the time being. There might be a huge crisis in the tribe. Only this kind of big thing that concerned the whole tribe would make the team leader blow the horn. As for other reasons they could not think of. The people on the mountain had similar reactions, especially the chief, the shaman, and a few prestigious people in the tribe. At this moment their faces all changed. What's going on? Did Duokong blow the horn? The leader ran out of the house and asked. I don't know. It came from the foot of the mountain. Let's go. Some people dropped their bowls and ran over after eating 2 mouthfuls of food. Some people rushed over in the middle of going to the toilet. The shamaness, who had just discussed with the leader, was not a combatant. She was old and it was not good for her to run around, so she stayed on the mountain. One figure after another ran down the mountain. The other residents of the tribe, the elderly and the children who were not strong enough to fight, all ran into the house to hide. Even the naughtiest child ran into the house obediently, while the warriors picked up the weapons in their hands. In just 2 or 3 breaths the atmosphere of the tribe changed. They were ready for battle. The ferocious beasts in the animal pens, big and small, were trembling. They had no choice. The Yanjiao people were too scary when they were ready for battle. Although the Yanjiao tribe was on a large mountain, with the strength of the chief and Guangyi, it did not take long for them to get to Duokang's location from the mountain. At first, the people who had hurried over from the mountains had thought that it was an invasion by other tribes or a powerful fearsome beast. However, when they arrived, they did not see a single fearsome beast. The dinosaur buried its head in the ground in the animal pen was completely ignored. Looking around, there were no other tribesmen around except for a few young people who were standing there in a daze. Usually, when something big happened to the tribe, it would be on a larger scale. However, the situation here was completely different from what they had imagined. Duokong, what happened? Chief Zhengluo looked around and asked. The others who arrived were also confused. The first thing they did when they arrived was to look for beasts. When they did not find any, they looked for people from other tribes. Their eyes lingered on Jue and Tao Zheng for a while, asking what happened. But the 2 of them did not know anything. They did not understand Duokang's actions at all. It was the first time they had even heard of the horn. They only knew about the horn. When they were young, they heard about it from their elders. They even dreamed about taking the horn when they competed for the position of leader of the hunting team. But when they saw Duokong blow the horn with their own eyes, they were so shocked their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Actually, when Duokong was blowing the horn, he didn't think that such a misunderstanding would occur. At that time he didn't have time to think about anything else. When he heard the chief's question, he came back to his senses. However, he didn't answer. Instead, he raised his hand and pointed. Chief Zhengluo looked in the direction Duokong was pointing and frowned. There was an unfamiliar young man standing there, but he could feel the Yinjiao aura on him. He was from their tribe, not an enemy. Just as he was about to ask Duokong what the problem was, Zhengluo's eyes widened in disbelief. He quickly walked over to Xiaoxian and looked closely at the bone necklace Xiaoxian was wearing. The most important thing was the bright red ball on the necklace. Seeing the ball, even the usually calm Chief Zhengluo's breathing quickened. "You..." Zhengluo's voice trembled uncontrollably. "You..." Xiaoxian looked at the man in front of him. He was so emotional that he could not speak properly. He grinned. "Do you remember the Yinjiao tribe in the fearsome beast forest?" Many people did not understand. Where was the fearsome beast forest? Weren't there many fearsome beasts in the forest? Which forest were they talking about? But as the chief, Zhengluo knew very well. Because of this, Zhengluo's thoughts were confirmed. You come with me." Zhengluo did not say much. He urgently needed the shamaness to confirm it again. Although he was leaning towards that guess, it had been nearly 1,000 years. His ancestors had not met this person for generations, but now he had suddenly appeared in front of them without warning. No one could believe it at once. Zhengluo did not care about the others. He dragged Xiaoxian up the mountain and ran away in a flash. Everyone was left in a daze. They were confused by their chief and leader's huge reaction. What was going on? Was there still danger? Should the people who had gathered here disperse? Duokong, who had regained his senses, quickly followed behind. He didn't care about the other people's questions. He didn't have the time to talk to these people. Moreover, without the shaman's permission, he couldn't tell them anything. He just asked the people who had gathered to disperse and then rushed up the mountain. Others may not know about the bone necklace, but Duokong remembered it clearly. After all, when he took over as the leader of the hunting group, he had touched the box and made a vow. It belonged to the ancestors. He had been told the story of the bone necklace. The shaman, who had been sitting on the mountain, looked worried. She had a feeling that something was going to happen, but it did not seem like a disaster. What was it? Hearing the commotion, the shamaness looked up and saw the usually calm Zhengluo hurriedly pulling a young man over like the wind. Ever since Zhengluo took over as the chief, the shaman had never seen him so anxious. "What's wrong?" The shaman got up. Before she could finish, she looked at the bone necklace around Xiaoxian's neck. She exclaimed, "The elder's bone necklace?" There was no mistake, it was the elder's bone necklace. She had 3 bone ornaments in her hands, but they were all dim and lifeless, as if they were in a deep sleep. In the past, the voodoo puppets all felt that their ancestors were disappointed in their actions. Many voodoo puppets left with guilt in their hearts. But now, the strange young man standing in front of them was wearing an elder's bone ornament. The ball in the elder's bone ornament was the fiery red bead in the stories left behind by their ancestors. It was the same bead that carried a totemic flame. Chapter 376. You're really from there? The shamaness looked in a certain direction. Xiaoxian knew what she meant. He nodded. Yes. You're all here? Where did you come from? What's with the elder's bone ornament you're wearing? The shaman, who usually showed a serious face to others and was a man of few words, was now full of eagerness and asked several questions in a row. Xiaoxian answered her questions one by one. He told her everything he knew about the history of 1,000 years ago. He told her about the life of the other tribe that had been wandering outside for nearly 1,000 years. He also told her about his return to the old haunt. He also mentioned the other tribes and the slave masters in the desert. The slave masters in the desert were at war. I came across the underwater passage by chance. The others are still there. Xiaoxian said. The shamaness and Chief Zhongluo's eyes reddened when they heard that the other branch of the tribe had lived alone for almost 1,000 years. They had suffered so much and suffered for so long. The Flaming Horns tribe mentioned in the records left by their ancestors was very powerful in the past. However, 1,000 years ago, there was a change in internal disagreements, which caused this powerful tribe to split into two halves and wander about on their own. As for this bone ornament, I found the remains of our ancestors in a stone worm's cave during a hunt. The ancestor was wearing this. Later, the shamaness gave it to me. When I returned to the old haunt, the fire seed was reignited in the fire pit. This bone ornament lit up. Xiao Xian also told her about the flame giant that had appeared at that time. Hearing this, the shamaness, who was usually calmer than Chief Zhongluo, suddenly stood up. Her voice was severely distorted, and the hand holding her walking stick was shaking. Really? Really? Xiao Xian took off the bone ornament necklace and handed it to the shamaness for a closer look. The shamaness threw away her walking stick and carefully took the bone ornament from Xiao Xian with both hands. It was like she was holding the most precious treasure in the world. Her eyes were sincere. She bent her knees and knelt in a certain direction. 2 streams of tears flowed down her wrinkled skin and dripped to the ground. This was the first time in her life that she had lost her composure. Chief Zhongluo stood beside the shamaness, facing the direction and bowing with the highest etiquette of the Flaming Horn tribe. Although they still had a fire pit here, it was no longer the same as before. Plus, that direction was where their roots were, where their ancestors lived. Bang! A figure pushed the door open and came in. This person was originally angry and had a questioning look on his face, but when he saw the chief and shaman kneeling on the ground, he was so scared that his face turned pale. This was because the position of the door was in the direction where the shaman was kneeling, and when he came in, he happened to be in front of the shaman and the chief. The man immediately jumped away as if he had been stabbed all over. His anger and questioning just now were all gone. He stuttered, "What happened?" Not far from the door, there were many people, including Duo Kong and Guang Yi. However, they didn't dare to push the door open, so they waited outside for the chief to speak. The door of the chief's room was made of soundproof wood. They couldn't hear the conversation inside at all. They could only suppress their curiosity and wait anxiously outside. But now that they saw the scene of the chief and the shamaness kneeling down, they scattered to both sides and looked inside with even stronger curiosity. After this interruption, the chief and shaman calmed down a little. Although they were still excited, they already knew what they wanted to know the most. There was no need to rush. He called a few people to come in. Zhongluo glared at the person who had just barged in. The other person also knew what he did wasn't right this time. He scratched the back of his head and didn't say anything. Those who were called in were the ones with the highest status in the tribe. Some were young and some were old. The shaman repeated Xiao Xian's words and introduced Xiao Xian's identity. After listening to the shaman's narration, everyone was dumbfounded. Some people knew about that part of history and were equally excited, while others were more vague about it. Now that they heard it, they were very shocked. So their tribe was not complete. Xiao Xian is so young. It wasn't easy for him to find this place alone. An old man sighed and looked at Xiao Xian with love. He thought for a moment and added, "Everyone, please take care of him." Duo Kang's mouth twitched. Xiao Xian is stronger than Zhui. He could beat Zhui. Even among the people here, how many of them had the confidence to beat Xiao Xian? Did someone like that need to be taken care of? It was already good enough that he didn't beat them up. Right, Xiao Xian, how did you get into the tribe? Duo Kang asked. Could it be that the warriors guarding the tribe had taken a nap during their patrol? Did the guards leave their post? Xiao Xian looked at Guang Yi, who was sitting next to Duo Kang. He answered, "Uncle Guang Yi brought me in." When he heard his name, he looked up to see everyone looking at him in confusion. Guang Yi was even more confused. "I brought you in?" Obviously, he didn't remember Xiao Xian. If he had more time to interact with him, if he fought with Xiao Xian, Guang Yi would have a deeper impression of him. But he didn't. So when he looked at Xiao Xian's face, he still couldn't match him. "Yesterday afternoon when the sun was about to set, you took me to Guang Yi's house," Xiao Xian reminded him. Guang Yi thought for a moment and understood. "So it was you." The chief and the others were speechless. Duo Kang thought to himself, "Guang Yi, you idiot. Do you know that I was so shocked that I couldn't even blow the horn today? The shaman, who was drinking water to moisten his throat, calmed down and said solemnly, Xiao Xian, since you're an elder in that branch of the Flaming Horns tribe, it's the same here. Everyone looked at the shamaness. The position of elder had been vacant for many years, right? It was even a taboo because mentioning it would make the shamaness sad. Was it finally going to be lifted? And to a young man about the same age as their sons and grandsons. This involved their ancestors and another Yinjiao tribe. Even if they had other thoughts, they wouldn't say anything. After all, Xiao Xian's appearance was very important to the tribe. Plus, he was wearing the elder's bone ornament. The shamaness didn't care how much the others accepted. She frowned and tapped her walking stick on the ground to quiet them down. When she turned to look at Xiao Xian, her gaze softened. Xiao Xian, you said it yourself that you can't be sure if you can safely go through the underwater tunnel again. Why don't you stay here and wait for everyone to come up with a better plan? Then we can go back together. After all, that's our Yinjiao tribe's roots. Everyone else agreed. They couldn't wait to leave and see their long-lost brother. Xiao Xian nodded. Okay. He also wanted to find a better and safer way to bring everyone back. If everyone here went back, would Yinjiao be able to regain its former glory? After a pause, the shamaness said, in 2 days, the tribe will hold a ceremony to welcome Xiao Xian. Everyone get ready. After the important matters were discussed, the shamaness began to drive everyone away. When everyone left, the shamaness took Xiao Xian to her place and showed him some of the ancestors' records. Since Xiao Xian was an elder, he had the right to look through those records. The records were about their experiences and the changes in the fire seed. No one was allowed to enter the shamaness place without her permission. Xiao Xian was in the room the shamaness had arranged for him. He carefully looked through the records that had been passed down. In the next room, the shamaness took out the box containing the elder's bone ornaments. There were 3 bone ornaments in the box. The beads inlaid on the bone ornaments were dull. They couldn't be compared to the one Xiao Xian was wearing. They were like rusty swords, dull and dull. Looking at the 3 bone ornaments, the shamaness decided to take them out during the ceremony. Maybe they would be happy to see their compatriots. Chapter 377. Xiao Xian looked at the animal skin scroll in his hand. This was already the 10th scroll. Beside him was the food that the shaman had brought over, but Xiao Xian didn't touch it at all. From the moment he sat down until now, he hadn't looked at anything else besides the animal skin scroll in his hand. Previously, when Xiao Xian had told the shaman and chief about the other branch of the tribe, the 2 of them had felt that the other branch's experience was too bitter. But now, looking at the records in his hand, Xiao Xian realized that this branch's experience wasn't much better. Back then they had paid a huge price. Less than 1/10 of them had made it here safely. It could be said that they had suffered heavy losses. Even those who had made it here had varying degrees of injuries. From these records, Xiao Xian learned that as early as 1,000 years ago, people in the tribe had discovered that the fire seed was weakening, but they hadn't been able to find a solution. It wasn't until the appearance of the slave masters that they saw an opportunity. The reason why the slave masters were able to travel from this continent to the other side was because of the great changes in the world 1,000 years ago. The mountains became valleys and the sea became land. The underwater passage that Xiao Xian had walked through had indeed risen because of the great changes in the world. Then a group of slave masters had walked over that bridge. The place near the bridge was the dry land that Xiao Xian had seen at the beginning. In fact, it was used by the slave masters here to exile the sinners. The environment there was harsh and there wasn't even a single tribe back then. It was even worse than the current drought. In the desolate land, even if there were many exiles, there weren't many who survived. If not for this, when the bridge rose because of the great changes in the world, there would have been more slave masters who had crossed over. Among the slave masters who had crossed over 1,000 years ago, there were a few geniuses. These people were mentioned in the animal skin scrolls. They were all people that the Yinjiao people had come into contact with. Among them, a person named Mu Han was mentioned the most. According to the records on the animal skin scroll, the reason why the slave masters were able to rise over there was mainly because of this Mu Han. Looking at the records on the animal skin scroll, the Yinjiao ancestors had come into contact with this Mu Han quite a bit. Back then, The chief of the Yanjiao tribe who had brought his people out to avoid disaster had fought with Mu Han. The two sides weren't enemies, but they weren't friends either. After knowing each other for a long time, they understood each other very well. Later, the chief of the Yanjiao had won a contest and obtained some secret information about the slave masters from Mu Han. At that time, the bridge in the sea was already very unstable. Whether it was the Yanjiao shaman or some people who were good at divination with Mu Han, they all said that the bridge wouldn't last for long. It was also at that time that the Yanjiao tribe had the biggest disagreement. The chief wanted to go to the other side of the bridge to find a solution to the weakening of the fire seed, but the shaman strongly opposed it. At that time, the next shaman of the tribe had already been decided. His name was Qi, and he was the successor that the shaman had spent a lot of time and effort grooming. He also had high hopes for him because Qi was indeed a genius. He was also one of the few people who had the power of inheritance before becoming the shaman. Just like how Xiaoxian had helped the shaman draw the Wu roll, Qi had also helped the shaman draw the Wu roll very early on. But in the end, that genius stood on the chief's side. Together with the chief, they brought half of the tribesmen and half of the fire seed from the sea bridge to the mainland. They experienced all kinds of difficulties and dangers. They were ostracized, targeted, and mocked until they came to this forest. After that, there were 10 full volumes of animal skin. All of them recorded how Qi had found a way to suppress the weakening of the fire seed, and the mystery of the disappearance of the fire seed of the slave owners and the tribes here. Finally, this genius found a solution when he was old. The fire seed hasn't disappeared. It still exists in the blood of the Yanjiao people. It will continue to exist with the blood of the Yanjiao people. Reading up to this point, Xiaoxian thought that the other half of the fire seed had already merged with the Yanjiao people's bodies. At the back of these scrolls was a very simple drawing. It was the last time Qi had knelt down to the shaman before he came with the chief. Did he regret it? From the words and drawings Qi wrote at the end of his life, it could be seen that he didn't regret it. But he did feel guilt and regret. He missed the old place very much. But Qi knew that the bridge had already sunk, and he didn't know when it would rise again. Even if it rose again, he wouldn't be able to see it. However, Qi believed that when the bridge appeared again, the tribesmen would be able to return to the tribe with the solution he had found. One day, we will return to the old place. At the end of the scroll, there was a sentence similar to what Xiaoxian had seen written by Zan on the stone room. But they didn't know that the Yanjiao tribe that had stayed behind had bad luck. As they walked, they found that the earth had split open, and then a giant river had appeared, completely cutting off their way back. They had lived a savage life for nearly 1,000 years. Seeing this, Xiaoxian couldn't help but sigh. It hadn't been easy. Whether it was the shaman or Qi and the chief, no one was truly satisfied. After all, Yanjiao had been split into two. In their eyes, they were all sinners who had let down their ancestors. Looking at the scrolls left behind by Qi and the chief, one could see that their greatest wish was that one day, the two tribes would be reunited. Yanjiao's prosperity and glory were indispensable. From the records left behind by the chief, Xiaoxian also discovered some things about Mu Han. Because he had interacted with Mu Han a lot, the records left behind by the chief were mostly about Mu Han. It was said that Mu Han had been exiled because he had been tricked. Otherwise, a genius like him wouldn't have been exiled so easily. But who would have thought that this exiled person would encounter a fortuitous encounter and cross the bridge from one side to the other? In the chief's records, there was a paragraph that said, Mu Han felt that this was a paradise. This referred to the other side of the bridge, where Yanjiao and the other tribes lived. There were weak people like wanderers and prisoners of war who weren't valued. These were all excellent slaves because these people didn't have power, but thirsted for power. This kind of person was the best slave. There were too many suitable slaves, and this completely ignited Mu Han's ambition. But he also resented the people who had exiled him. He wanted to kill them one day, so he abandoned his original surname, Mu, and changed it to the more murderous surname Shi. Back then, the chief, who knew Mu Han very well, had written some comments on the scroll. The general idea was that Mu Han's life had been at a disadvantage because he had shown off his abilities. He clearly had talent and power, but he had been tricked in the end. Xiaoxian recalled the several big cities on the other side of the desert, as well as the surnames of the city lords there. There were no surnames of Mu and Sure. No, there was a surname of Sure. Could it be that Mu Han had realized his own shortcomings and hoped that his juniors would know how to conceal their strength, endure silently, and trick others without batting an eyelid? Was that why he had changed the murderous Sure to Sure? Thinking about it, it was really possible. Didn't Sure Shu and his gang silently launch a war that swept through the entire desert? Perhaps Sure Shu's understanding of Yinjiao was not because of Dao Yu, but because of the records left by their ancestor Mu Han? Whether it was true or not, Xiao Xian now had no way to investigate, so he couldn't ask Sure Shu for the real reason. Xiao Xian read the records left by Qi, who had changed Yanjiao, again carefully rolled up the scroll and put it back. If he could go back, these were all very important things. They were the results of Qi's life, and also the antidote to change the weakening of Yanjiao's fire seed. Xiao Xian stretched his stiff body and looked out of the window. Yang Guang was really brilliant. Chapter 378. Seeing Xiao Xian come out of the house, the shaman's serious face showed a rare smile. You've seen it all? Yes, I've seen it all. Xiao Xian came in front of the shaman and sat cross-legged on the animal skin cushion on the ground. He couldn't let the shaman look up at him all the time. He was worried about her neck. Our ancestors have always wanted to go back to the old land. Every year we send people to the other side of the sea to see if there is a chance to go back. But every year the results are disappointing. I didn't expect to meet you. The shaman sighed. I don't know if I can go back there safely. At that time I was forced to do so. I was lucky enough to survive, but I don't know if I can go back again. Why don't I go and see? Xiao Xian asked. Please don't. The shaman hurriedly stopped him. She didn't want Xiao Xian to take this risk. It was rare to meet people from the other side. What if something happened? She couldn't even cry. Xiao Xian recalled the ancestors' experiences recorded in the animal skin scroll, and thought about what he had encountered. He said, when I came from the bottom of the sea, there was only some dry seaweed in the passage. There was nothing else. I haven't seen the red and blue flowers recorded in the ancestors' records. So you better not take the risk. The opportunity can wait, but if you're gone, there's no other way. The shaman advised. She was about to say something else when she thought of something. Her whole body trembled and she looked at Xiao Xian in disbelief. You can understand the Wu roll? In the written records, there was no mention of any red or blue flowers in the passage. Only the Wu roll described them in detail. People who didn't understand the Wu roll wouldn't know this. If she hadn't copied it herself and looked at it often, she wouldn't have remembered it so clearly. Yes, Xiao Xian thought that after the people here merged the fire seed into their bodies, there would be some other changes. Maybe they could understand the Wu roll, but now it seemed that this was not the case. Can't others see it? Xiao Xian asked. Can people on your side see it? The shaman was even more shocked. Xiao Xian shook his head. On our side, besides the shaman, I'm the only one who can understand it. You're from the other side? The shaman asked in surprise. No, I'm an elder. We have a shaman on our side. He's about the same age as you, but he's already groomed an excellent successor. Why can't you? At this moment, the old lady imagined a lot of slave owners fighting for power and profit to launch a variety of you pitting me, I pitted you drama. The tribe's fire seed hadn't merged with the people, so there were much fewer people who could understand the shaman paintings. According to the records of the ancestors, almost everyone who could understand the shaman paintings became the shaman of the tribe, just like Qi 1,000 years ago. Therefore, the old lady felt that since there was a person with talent comparable to Qi in the past, the shaman of the tribe should train Xiao Xian well. If shaman the shaman, the shaman thought. No, he said it many times, but I refused, Xiao Xian explained. He couldn't let the old man be the scapegoat. Why don't you want to? The shaman wondered. She hadn't found the most suitable successor in the tribe. Although there were a few people who could see some of the things on the Wu roll, they couldn't really understand it. They needed to be trained for a long time. They were far from Xiao Xian's level. I'm not suitable, Xiao Xian said. He couldn't tell the shaman that he was born restless, always running around and causing trouble. If such a person became a witch, He didn't know if it would lead the tribe in a strange direction. Moreover, in such a big environment, Xiaoxian didn't think his survival wisdom was better than these people. She wanted to persuade Xiaoxian to take over her position, but after hearing this, the shaman swallowed her words. She wanted to scold Xiaoxian, but she couldn't bear to. The muscles on her face trembled due to the complex changes in her emotions. She suddenly had the urge to kowtow to the ancestors who had passed away, to vent the emotions in her heart that were like 10,000 beasts running wildly. After chatting with the shaman for a while, Xiaoxian came out. As soon as Xiaoxian came out, he was stopped. Chief Zhengluo took him to a place on the top of the mountain. It used to be an open space, but now it was busy. Stones were piled up and thick logs were moved over. The sound of chopping could be heard. A house was being built here. Chief Zhengluo had ordered people to build it for Xiaoxian. It might not be finished before tonight. You can sleep at my place for the night, and it will be finished tomorrow. You don't have to worry about anything. There are animal hides that have been dried, baked pottery, and so on. Zhengluo pointed in that direction, then shouted at the people who kept glancing over curiously, "Pay attention to what you're doing, don't look to the side. You stop looking. You almost chopped off your own hand." The people who were yelled at quickly looked away. Even though they were curious about Xiaoxian, they didn't dare to wander off recklessly with the chief here. After Zhengluo showed Xiaoxian the house under construction, he continued walking up the mountain. Along the way, he introduced some of the more special places in the tribe, such as the fire pit for sacrificial ceremonies, and the storehouse for centralized storage. Xiaoxian felt like a monkey in a crowd. He was surrounded by curious gazes, as if they were looking at something rare. When he wasn't paying attention, he was surrounded by a circle of people. When Zhengluo yelled at him, the crowd dispersed. After a while, new people gathered. When the chief yelled again, the crowd dispersed again, repeating the process over and over again. They couldn't be blamed for being curious. Previously, when Duokang's horn sounded, it scared the tribesmen into preparing for battle. In the end, the chief and the other leaders went up the mountain in silence. The cause of the incident was a young man, and it was said that this young man was from the Yanjiao. Could he be a stray descendant of the tribe? But even if he was a stray descendant, he wouldn't be personally accompanied by the chief. A few years ago, there were people who disappeared for a long time who came back with their wives and children, but the shaman and the leaders never treated them like this. Looking at the smile on the chief's face, it was the first time they realized that the chief could smile so amiably. It gave them goosebumps. What happened at the foot of the mountain, the strange expressions of the chiefs and elders, and the welcoming ceremony that would be held in 2 days, all made the people in the tribe curious, just like the bubbles in the boiling water, bubbling and bubbling. Duokang's son Duoli was gossiping with Taozheng and the others. They had just been yelled at by the chief and were grilling meat while discussing Xiaoxian. As they were talking, Taozheng elbowed Duoli, who was gnawing on a beast leg, and pointed his chin in a direction, indicating for him to look there. Duoli raised his head and saw his father passing by with a pensive expression. Without wiping his mouth, Duoli hugged the beast leg and ran over shouting, "Father, father! I haven't returned to the fire seed yet, what are you shouting for?" Duokang scolded. The tribesmen would also be cremated at the fire pit after they died. They believed that the souls of the deceased would return to the fire seed with their ancestors and their descendants. "Aren't I afraid you'll run away?" Duoli handed the beast leg that he had gnawed on to his father to please him. Duokang looked at the beast leg with disdain and ignored it, planning to leave. "Hey, don't go. Tell us about that Xiaoxian," Duoli hurriedly said. Taozheng and the others who were grilling meat by the fire pricked up their ears, afraid that they would miss a word. If it was in the past, Duokang would definitely notice that they were eavesdropping, but now he was full of thoughts and didn't pay attention to them at all. Duokang looked at his son's curious eyes and thought about how to describe the two tribes that shared the same bloodline. After a moment of silence, Duokang said, "If I tell you..." "Yes. Tell me what?" Duoli looked at his father expectantly. Taozheng and the others pricked up their ears even higher, wishing that they could stretch their ears a little longer to eavesdrop more clearly. "If I tell you that you have a brother..." Duoli's hands trembled and he almost dropped the beast leg he was hugging. "Brother? What brother?" Duoli stuttered. Duokong pondered over his words and continued, "Same father, same mother. Born at the same time as you, biological brother." Thud! The beast leg fell from Duo Li's hands. Chapter 379. After being born for so many years, he was the only child in the family. Since when did he have a brother? Duo Li stared blankly at his father. On the other side, Tao Zheng and the others who were eavesdropping were also shocked by the news. But after thinking about it, they felt that something was wrong. Xiaoxian didn't look like Duo Li. Father, Xiaoxian and our brothers? Brothers? Duo Li pointed at the figure in the distance and asked. I'm just giving an example. Duokong also realized that his son had misunderstood. How stupid. But Xiaoxian's background wasn't something they dared to talk about unless the chief or shaman said it themselves. Many people in the tribe knew that the Yinjiao tribe didn't belong to this place, but came from the other side of the sea. But after 1,000 years, generations of people told stories of the past to their descendants. Now many people only treated those stories as stories. If Duokong hadn't taken over the position of hunting leader, he wouldn't have had the chance to know more. As for the young people nowadays, they usually didn't think so much. Anyway, you guys just treat Xiaoxian as your brother. Duokong didn't know how to express himself, so he just said this sentence. But then he felt that it wasn't right. Xiaoxian was an elder, and these kids should treat him with respect. 2 days before the welcoming ceremony, the atmosphere in the tribe was strange. Some were happy, some were curious, and all the topics revolved around Xiaoxian, this new face that had suddenly appeared. As Duokang's word spread, the people who didn't have much gossip and entertainment were excited. Every day, many people would go up the mountain to watch. If it wasn't for the chief and other elders, they would have personally talked to Xiaoxian. On the other hand, Xiaoxian experienced the feeling of being watched as if he was a rare object. He also felt the enthusiasm of the tribesmen. The house had been built. Beds, tables, chairs, pottery, and other things had all been prepared. On the day they moved in, many people had sent things to Xiaoxian's house. Some had sent meat, grains, furs, and so on. As hunters, every family had stored furs in their house. In just half a day, a large number of furs had piled up in Xiaoxian's new house. Xiaoxian silently engraved these people's gifts in his mind. Although these people were simply expressing their enthusiasm and didn't intend to receive any benefits from Xiaoxian, Xiaoxian still remembered their kindness. A group of aunties came over from the mountain, each of them holding a straw rope as a ruler. They held the straw rope and pointed it at Xiaoxian before they happily left. The next day, several sets of clothes were sent over. Some were made of animal skin, some were made of cloth, and some were made of animal skin. The clothes for the ceremony had already been prepared. The animal skin used was from the shamaness herself. It was an excellent fearsome beast skin and was very sturdy. Because there was no fire seed, the ceremony was a little different from what Xiaoxian knew. But there wasn't much of a difference. On the day of the ceremony, when the sun set and the sky darkened, the people at the foot of the mountain walked up one after another. Everyone was neatly dressed and wore clean clothes. Xiaoxian noticed that on the day of the ceremony, most of the tribesmen wore animal skin. Almost no one wore cloth. Most of the totemic warriors wore sleeveless animal skin, especially the intermediate and advanced totemic warriors. Every time there was a ceremony, they would expose their arms to show off their totemic tattoos. This was also a chance to show off their strength. The ceremonial clothes prepared by the tribe for Xiaoxian were sleeveless as well. In the eyes of Chief Zheng Luo and the others, this was a good opportunity for Xiaoxian to show off his strength. After all, not many people saw the battle between Xiaoxian and Zhao. The others only heard about it. Seeing was believing. Seeing with one's own eyes would leave a deeper impression. It would also give them a better understanding of Elder Xiaoxian. Because of the festive nature of the ceremony, many of the warriors inherited the customs passed down from their ancestors. They brought along various hunting fruits, sharp horns, bone ornaments, and so on. Men and women of all ages were dressed up. In comparison, Xiaoxian looked refreshed. Xiaoxian had not gone hunting since he arrived here. To make it easier for him to travel, he did not collect any souvenirs from his hunts. The only thing he wore was an elder's bone ornament. Among the white bone ornaments, a fiery red ball stood out. Even at night, as long as there was a little light, it would reflect the light of Mars. Are you ready? The shamaness looked at Xiao Xian, who was standing beside her. Yes. Although this wasn't the tribe he was familiar with, the Yinjiao atmosphere was very strong. Xiao Xian quickly adapted. Go. The shamaness said as she walked towards the fire pit. Xiao Xian walked in the opposite direction. The welcoming ceremony required walking from the bottom of the mountain to the top. This was what every newcomer to Yinjiao had to go through. There was no fire in the fire pit at the top of the mountain, only torches. Xiao Xian waited at the bottom of the mountain. Beside him were two groups of people sent by the shamaness to protect him in case anything happened. The chanting from the top of the mountain could be heard faintly. The entire mountain was immersed in a solemn atmosphere. A red light flashed at the top of the mountain. The shamaness had lit a fire in the fire pit. With the sound of a horn, Xiao Xian walked up the mountain. There were many torches around, illuminating the path up the mountain. It was probably to make it easier for Xiao Xian to see the path. In fact, Xiao Xian could see clearly even without the torches. After passing through a deserted area, Xiao Xian saw a crowd gathering. The path up the mountain had been cleared. No one came close. People on both sides of the road looked at Xiao Xian curiously. This was the first time they had a chance to observe Xiao Xian up close. They didn't have to worry about being reprimanded by the chief and elders. This was Xiao Xian? The person that even Zhao couldn't do anything to? They heard that he was the one who robbed the Taihe tribe. No matter how they felt, they could only think about it. They couldn't say it out loud. They couldn't say it out loud during this ceremony. Using his special vision, Xiao Xian saw some red threads coming out from the crowd. They were coming out from everyone's body. They went all the way up and connected to the fire pit at the top of the mountain. As Xiao Xian got closer to the top of the mountain and the fire pit, the red ball on the bone ornament necklace on his body seemed to be on fire. A ball of flame gushed out from it. Seeing this, the people around him screamed. However, they quickly held their breaths and kept their mouths shut. Their eyes were fixed on Xiao Xian's necklace that was emitting flames. The totem patterns on Xiao Xian's body were also revealed. The magma-like flame patterns extended from his shoulders to his wrists and then to his palms. A senior totem warrior. He really was a senior totem warrior. The people around him stared with their eyes wide open. The fire pit finally appeared in front of Xiao Xian. It didn't have the surging flames in his memory, but it wasn't small either. It filled the entire fire pit. Beside the fire pit, the shaman stood there with a stone box in his hands. There were 3 bone ornaments in the box. They were the same as Xiao Xian's, but they weren't as bright. When Xiao Xian came closer, the shaman handed the box to Xiao Xian. Chapter 380. In the tribe, every person with a high position would swear to the fire pit and the 3 bone ornaments before taking over. When Zheng Luo took over as chief and Duokong took over as leader of the hunting team, they all went through the same procedure. So when the shamaness took these out, no one was surprised to see them. Except for those who were very close to the box, the others only knew that there was such a box but could not see what was inside. If not for this, Duokong wouldn't have been the only one who recognized the necklace when Xiao Xian fought Zhui 2 days ago. Xiao Xian bowed to the box. This was the way tribesmen greeted their ancestors. According to the original plan, when the box was taken out, it would be Xiao Xian's turn to say his oath. But those closest to the fire pit, such as Duokong and a few elders, waited and waited. Xiao Xian still did not speak. What's wrong? Did he forget his oath? Did he not remember what to say? Or was he so nervous that he forgot everything? Even Chief Zhengluo looked at Xiao Xian in confusion. But when he saw the excitement on the shamaness face, he realized that something had changed. Tears glistened in the shamaness' eyes as she stared unblinkingly at the box in her hands. The 3 bone ornaments that had been sleeping quietly in the box suddenly brightened when Xiao Xian came closer, as if the dust covering them had been swept away. Even if it was not as bright as the one worn by Xiao Xian, it was enough to make the shamaness happy. No one knew better than these adept puppets what the balls in the bone ornaments represented. In the past, every time the adept puppets saw the dim balls on the bone ornaments, they would feel a deep sense of guilt, as if they had been abandoned by their ancestors. But now this change gave the shamaness hope. The ancestors had not left. They had always been here, guarding the Yinjiao people. The Yinjiao people worshipped their ancestors, and these were left behind by the first shamanists. They represented the most powerful shamanists in the Yinjiao tribe. If he wasn't holding the stone box containing the bone ornament, he would have knelt down immediately upon seeing the bone ornament's transformation. Xiao Xian also saw the changes in the 3 bone ornaments. When he received the bone ornaments in another tribe, he learned from the shamanist that the first shamanist had left behind 6 balls and made them into 6 bone ornaments. Xiao Xian had seen 3 of them before, and Xiao Xian finally saw the remaining 3. It was good that they were still here. They were not lost. The 6 bone ornaments would be reunited one day. According to the shamanist's instructions, Xiao Xian transformed the totem power in his body into a form outside his body, and separated a part of it to connect to the fire pit. This was something he had to do before he made the oath. The others in the tribe had connected to the fire pit in this way, and made the fire rise. However, Xiao Xian didn't expect that the moment he separated the totem power to connect to the fire pit, there would be a drastic change. He didn't even get the chance to make the oath he had prepared. All his attention was attracted by this change. The totem flame in his mind became active, and at the same time, the fire in the fire pit rushed up. The sudden rise of the fire in the fire pit attracted everyone's attention. Almost at the same time, all the torches around, including the bonfires on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain, were extinguished in an instant. The only fire on the entire mountain was the flame in the fire pit. The elders in the tribe had lived to this age, and had participated in countless ceremonies and ceremonies. They had also heard many stories about the fire pit from their fathers and grandfathers, but they had never seen this scene before. Between heaven and earth, only the fire on the mountain top seemed to exist. It was like a king standing on high looking down on all living beings. The rising fire rolled up, and a pattern of 2 horns appeared in it. It turned from blurry to clear. This was a pattern that every Yinjiao person was familiar with. They had seen it in the fire pit during the ceremony, but it was not as big or as clear as this one. The temperature of his blood seemed to be rising, like boiling soup, rushing and cheering in his body. The vibration came from his bone marrow, and the totem patterns on his body seemed to be brighter than before. This is. The shamanist looked at the high fire in the fire pit, and was shocked to the point of being sluggish. However, this was not the end. Soon, the shamaness was disturbed by another wave of fluctuation. She looked at the stone box in her hand. The round beads on the bone ornaments in the stone box began to glow red. It was not the light reflected, but the light emitted by the beads themselves. The light on the beads grew brighter and brighter. Finally, a flame emerged from the beads. 3 bone ornaments and 3 round beads appeared at the same time. Even those who were standing a little far away, and could not see the bone ornaments clearly could see the fire coming from the box. The air was scorching hot, but none of the Yinjiao people were burned. On the contrary, they felt an unprecedented peace of mind, and a touch of being protected. This unprecedented change surprised every Yinjiao person gathered here. They threw all other thoughts out of their minds, and just stared at the fire pit. On the bone ornaments worn by Xiao Xian, the flames from the round beads began to expand. In the box held by the shamaness, the flames from the 3 bone ornaments began to expand at the same pace. The shamaness and Xiao Xian were standing by the fire pit. Both of them were wrapped in flames. If it were not for the fact that they were unharmed and unscathed, the others would have panicked. The shamaness' body was stiff, and she carefully held the stone box. She did not even dare to shake her hands, for fear that she would disrupt this change. Although she did not know what was going to happen next, she knew that it would be of great benefit to the Yinjiao tribe. Compared to the shocked Yinjiao people and the excited shamaness, Xiao Xian was much calmer. He had also guessed what was going to happen. Such a change had happened once before. Looking at the rising flames, Xiao Xian looked up at the sky. Seeing this, the shamaness also looked up. When the others saw their actions, although they did not understand why, they also looked up. Some people even wondered if this was a new ritual to pay respects to the ancestors. However, they soon found that they were wrong. As the balls of flames rose and gathered in the air, they formed a huge human silhouette. This silhouette was quickly becoming clearer and more complete. The fire in the fire pit grew stronger and stronger. A flame giant appeared at the top of the mountain. Every Yinjiao person was shocked by the appearance of this flame giant. When the people who were paying attention to all of this came back to their senses, they found that they were already kneeling on the ground. As the flame giant opened his arms, the flames from the fire pit suddenly rose into the sky, as if they were going to break through the sky. The nearby mountains and the thick dark clouds in the sky that blocked the moonlight were all dyed with a layer of fire. The majestic aura spread out, and in an instant, it swept through the entire mountain, spreading to every corner. Yin Zhan, who did not spread his flames, used his aura to intimidate everything. There were still some captured beasts in the animal pens at the foot of the mountain. At this moment, every beast in the pens, no matter if it was an ordinary beast or a fearsome beast like the dinosaur, was trembling and wanted to turn into a stone. The dinosaur that was tied up by thick vines and thrown on the ground struggled violently. It wanted to dig a hole in the ground with its hooves and bury its head in it to relieve the fear in its heart. On the other side of the man-made river that surrounded the mountain where Yinjiao was located, there were some restless beasts in the forest on the other side. At this moment, as if they had been hit by a stick, they all turned around and left one after another. In the Taihe tribe, which was closest to Yinjiao, according to the custom, those who were not assigned to patrol would go to bed when the sky turned dark. At this time, many people were already in bed. Some warriors had just laid down and were about to fall asleep, but their bodies suddenly shook, and the hair on their necks stood up. They were so scared that they did not feel sleepy at all. They rolled out of bed and did not bother to put on their clothes. They ran out of the house to higher ground or open space, and then looked in the direction of Yinjiao. The two tribes were not too close to each other, so they could not see what was happening over there. They could only see the red sky and the forest. In the dark forest, there was a small conspicuous patch of fiery red. It was a strange scene. What was Yinjiao doing over there? Chapter 381. On the day of the welcoming ceremony, Xiao Xian, the newly appointed young elder, made everyone in the Yinjiao tribe witness an unforgettable scene. If there were doubts about Xiao Xian's appointment as elder, after tonight's ceremony, all of them were forgotten. No one objected to this position, second only to the shamaness and the chief. As for Xiao Xian, the tribe's respect for him grew. Every time they saw Xiao Xian, they would think of the flame giant that rose from Xiao Xian's body. The shock that came from deep within their bones was still clear when they recalled it. After the welcoming ceremony, Xiao Xian was officially introduced to everyone. As for Xiao Xian's background, it wasn't important. To the tribesmen, they only needed to know that Xiao Xian was an elder. As for the rest, if the shamaness and the chief didn't say anything, they wouldn't ask. This was very similar to the personality of the other Yinjiao tribe. If there was a moment of doubt, they would gossip in private and forget about it after a while. There will be a hunt in 7 days. Xiao Xian, you should come with everyone, Chief Zhengluo said to Xiao Xian. Group activities were a way to speed up integration. Hunting would allow Xiao Xian to better adapt to the tribe. Moreover, Zheng Luo believed in Xiao Xian's strength. If he could come here safely on his own, and as a senior totemic warrior, his hunting skills wouldn't be bad. Okay, Xiao Xian replied. Zheng Luo also wanted to give Xiao Xian some bronze wares, but Xiao Xian refused. After a few days in the tribe, Xiao Xian had a general understanding of the tribe's situation. Although many tribes used metal wares, most of them were traded from the slave masters. The core seeds were in the hands of the slave masters. Moreover, the core seeds here were much larger than the ones in the desert. The slave masters who were exiled 1,000 years ago only brought 3 small core seeds with them. The ones left in the main camp were all big guys with abundant metal sources. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so generous as to trade for bronze wares. However, the price of these bronze wares was also high. Many things needed to be exchanged for them. Before the children of the tribe went hunting for the first time, they would be given a bronze sword or other objects by their parents as a gift. Sometimes such a tool would accompany them for a lifetime. A sword or an axe, etc. If there was a gap during a hunt, the tribe had a coppersmith. Although his skills were not top-notch and could not be compared to the talents of the slave owners, he could still deal with some basic situations. He could reforge the broken copper into a sharp weapon. Warriors like Zheng Luo had excellent hunting skills, so naturally they could trade for more bronze wares. However, Xiaoxian didn't lack bronze wares to hunt. If he wanted to trade for bronze wares, he could rely on his own abilities. Thus, while Zheng Luo and the others were wondering how Xiaoxian would handle the upcoming hunt, they saw Xiaoxian moving stone after stone into the house. Ever since bronze wares entered the tribe, more and more people realized the convenience of bronze wares. Stone wares naturally faded out. Although some people still used them, they weren't necessary anymore. Seeing Xiaoxian move stones, the shamaness and the chief felt sad. It turned out that another group of brothers was still using stone wares. Once again rejecting the shamaness, the chief and the elders' good intentions, Xiaoxian focused on crafting stone wares at home. Another reason why Xiaoxian rejected the shamaness and the chief's gifts was that he was used to crafting his own wares. He might not be used to other people's wares. If he wasn't used to it, it would be easy to make mistakes during a hunt. Many people in the tribe couldn't accurately differentiate between stone materials anymore. However, Xiaoxian could tell at a glance. The stones he brought back were knocked down from somewhere outside the tribe. The stone material was above average. It wasn't the best, but it was still passable. If he needed more, he could wait until he found a better stone during a hunt. Thus, every day when everyone passed by Xiaoxian's house, they could hear the clanking sounds from inside. Duokong and Guang Yi curiously ran in to watch Xiaoxian craft stone. Duokong and Guang Yi watched as Xiaoxian cut the large stone into small pieces and grinded it into shape. Both of them had been using bronzeware for a long time and were amazed. So this was how their ancestors survived when they didn't have bronzeware. Other than the large and small stonewares, there were all kinds of wooden and bone tools, needles, nails, and even miniature boomerangs. Xiaoxian had them all prepared. This time he planned to hunt more. He had just arrived and received a lot of benefits from everyone. He wanted to repay them. He also wanted to store more goods to exchange for other things in the future. 7 days later, some of the warriors who were going out to hunt gathered at the open space at the foot of the mountain. They were ready to go. Xiaoxian painted some colored mud on his face. This was similar to his experience in the other tribe. Before hunting, they would paint patterns on their faces. But in the past, it was because of tradition and belief. Now it was used for another purpose: camouflage. When the warriors here used their totemic power, the totemic patterns on their bodies would become brighter. The brighter the totemic power, the brighter the totemic patterns. Therefore, before hunting, they would use a kind of colored mud to cover their faces and exposed arms with a layer of it, making it easier to hide. This colored mud was specially made by the shamaness. When Yinjiao's ancestors came here, they experimented with a type of mud for camouflage. It didn't dry as easily as normal mud. When applied to the face, it wouldn't fall off due to the movements of the facial muscles. It could last for at least 10 days. The hunting team was still led by Duokong and Guang Yi. Those who didn't participate in the previous hunt, if they weren't on duty, came this time. For example, Wu Zhan, Taozheng Zhui, and the rest of the younger generation were very enthusiastic. With Xiaoxian as a comparison, they were motivated. Especially Zhui, who was still holding back his anger. After checking everyone and lining up, Duokong waved his hand. "Let's go." Roar. The team roared in unison. Then it was time to sing a hunting song, a tradition of the tribe. Since the beginning of time, there have been our ancestors. When the tribe first rose, hunting was our priority. Spring warmed up, the ice and snow melted. Birds and beasts jumped happily. Birds chirped and beasts roared. It was a familiar scene, a familiar feeling. Although it was different from before, the same song and the same atmosphere made Xiaoxian feel like he was back in the beginning, walking down the path of glory with the hunting team. He couldn't help but feel a warmth in his heart. He missed it so much. On the Taiha tribe's side, they were also planning to go hunting. After walking for a while, they heard the Yinjiao team singing again. They instantly panicked. Damn it, the Yinjiao people were here to annoy people. Hunting was exhilarating. Luckily, everyone's hunting areas were separated, so they didn't have to bump into each other. Otherwise, the Taiha people would have vomited their breakfast. Chapter 382. Tall trees could be seen everywhere in the dense forest. The trunks near the canopy were so thick that it would take 3 people to wrap their arms around them. However, The trunks near the ground were so thick that it would take 10 people to wrap their arms around them. The roots on the ground were twisted and intertwined, extending to the surroundings. They were like the claws of ancient beasts clinging to the ground. Going through these places was like climbing a slope, but it was not a problem for those who often hunted in the forest. Silhouettes shuttled through the dense forest. After going deep into the forest, the crowd dispersed, and each group went in different directions. This time it was not a group hunt, so the groups were scattered. Xiao Xian was with some young warriors. There were more than 20 people in the group, including Tao Zheng and Zhui. The leader of this group was Wu Zhan. According to their status, Xiao Xian should have been the leader. However, since it was the first time Xiao Xian had joined the group and was not familiar with the others, he did not take over the leader's position. Everyone in the group cooperated well. At the beginning, everyone was a little cautious because of Xiao Xian. However, after a while, they got used to it and the atmosphere of hunting returned to normal. No words were spoken. Just a movement and a look was enough to know what each other meant. They cooperated well. Before setting off, Tao Zheng had been told by the chief, the leader, his father, and a few uncles to take care of Xiao Xian. Although Xiao Xian was strong and was an elder, he was still young and might not be able to adapt to the rhythm of the hunting group quickly. Therefore, as they got closer to their usual hunting spot, Tao Zheng wondered if he should stop and explain to Xiao Xian first. However, Tao Zheng soon found that Xiao Xian did not need any reminders. In fact, he adapted very well. For example, when they ran into an unusual situation, Tao Zheng made a gesture, and the people behind him followed suit. Xiao Xian's movements were not slower than the others. He did not need any reminders from Tao Zheng at all. Behind the bushes in front of them, on a tree that was not too tall, the treetops were shaking. Because of the bushes and dense grass, the people in the group could not see clearly. Tao Zheng made a hand gesture, and the people behind him immediately slowed down. Their footsteps became lighter as they slowly approached. Like agile monkeys, you and another person leaped up a nearby tree and looked ahead. If there was prey there, then prepare to hunt. With his special vision, Xiao Xian was able to see through the bushes and see a shadow behind them. Judging from its silhouette, it wasn't very big. Judging from its bones, it was still in its infancy. Jumping up the tree, Zhui glanced over and shook his head at Tao Zheng. There was a clawed beast there. Their head outline looked very much like a horse. Their necks were slightly long and their torsos were very strong. Usually, they walked slowly and appeared to be sluggish. However, when they encountered danger, it was different. Their speed would increase by several levels. Their hooves were not only big but also hard. Being kicked was not a pleasant feeling. Clawed beasts were also on the hunting team's list of prey, but they did not include cubs. Generally speaking, if there was not a special shortage of food, Yanjiao's warriors would not hunt such cubs in the forest. First, there was no challenge. Even if they hunted one, they could not prove their strength. Second, the cubs did not have much meat. Compared to adult ferocious beasts, they had much less meat. It was better to save their strength for other prey. That was why the warriors were more willing to leave such young beasts for the future, or leave them for their descendants to deal with. At this time, the clawed beast that was still in its infancy was supporting itself on its hind legs. It was holding the tree trunk and eating the leaves and fruits on the tree. Its ears were moving, listening to the movements around it. However, it did not notice that there was a hunting team near it. It also did not know that it had escaped because it was not yet an adult. Further ahead, there was a river. There was a sandy land on the bank of the river. There were no traces of other animals around. We usually don't go to the river to get water. It's too dangerous. If we want to get water, we can get it from the trees and grass. Or we can go to the mountain streams. Tao Zheng explained to Xiao Xian in a low voice. What's in the river? Xiao Xian asked. There are fishes with sharp teeth. Sometimes there are anacondas lurking in the river. However, these are not the main reasons. Tao Zheng pointed at the sandy land. There might be bone beasts there. When they are there, the river is especially quiet. The fish and other underwater animals will avoid them. Bone beasts? This was a new name. Xiao Xian had never seen them before. Looking at the sandy land, Xiao Xian did not see anything wrong with it. However, his instincts told him that there was something there. Something dangerous. The bones of the bone beasts are very hard and suitable for making bone objects. The bone knives made are all very good things. However, bone beasts are not easy to hunt. Their skin is too hard and their skulls are more like a layer of hard stone. They are very strong. If we weren't confident, we wouldn't provoke the bone beasts there. Other than that, they are very cunning. They are very good at disguising themselves. Once again, Xiaoxian looked at the sandy beach and changed his vision. Through the sand he could see a very obvious giant skeleton under the sand. There was a bone beast there. It was no smaller than the dinosaur he saw earlier. As for the bone beast, just like Tao Zheng said, its head looked like it was covered with a stone helmet made of premium stone. One look and Xiaoxian could tell that it was very tough. The bone beast was buried in the sand. Only its head was above the ground. It closed its eyes, pressed down its ears, narrowed its nostrils and slowed its breathing. At first glance it looked like a normal rock on the ground. There were green moss and other plants on the rock. It looked very similar to the other rocks on the shore. Those who did not know about bone beasts would not have guessed that it was the head of a giant beast. Not only were they good at disguising themselves, but they also knew how to create a cover. If there weren't any big enough stones around them, they would look for some stones that were similar to their heads and kick them to the side of the river to make it look like they were real. It could be said that more than half of the rocks on the riverbank were brought over by the bone beasts. Otherwise, the rocks wouldn't all be so similar. There is a bone beast over there. Xiaoxian pointed at the rock. It seemed that bone beasts were solitary creatures. If they lived in groups, they would be much more dangerous. They would not even need to look at them. Tao Zheng looked in the direction Xiaoxian pointed. He could not tell which of the rocks was the bone beast's head. But why was Xiaoxian so sure? Hunting in the past was too dangerous. One of the reasons was that they could not pinpoint the exact location of the bone beast. If they got it wrong, the beast would attack them and they would be in a passive position. But if they could be sure, they just needed to prepare. They might be able to hunt it down. The thought of hunting the bone beast made Tao Zheng excited. They were young after all. They were more inclined to challenge. Are you sure? Tao Zheng asked again. Yes. After a pause, Tao Zheng asked again. Are there any other bone beasts around here? No, there's only that one. But it's huge, even bigger than the dinosaur we caught in the tribe. Do you want to hunt it? Xiaoxian looked at Tao Zheng. Let me discuss it with everyone. After all, he was leading a team. Tao Zheng could not act on his own and ignore the wishes of others. If he wanted to hunt such a huge beast, he would have to rely on everyone. He could not do it alone. Tao Zheng told everyone about the matter. As Tao Zheng expected, everyone was very interested in hunting that giant beast. Moreover, if they could determine its specific location first, they wouldn't be in a passive position from the beginning. As long as they were prepared enough, even if the hunt failed, they could still escape unscathed. How can you be sure that's the bone beast? Zhui stared at Xiaoxian, questioning him. He ignored Tao Zheng's tug. The others had their doubts too, but they were not brave enough to voice it out loud. They could not be blamed for not believing him. Even the most experienced warriors in the tribe would not dare to make such a claim. So what if Xiaoxian was an elder? Why should they believe him just because he said so? Hunting was not a game. A single mistake could land them in trouble or even death. Xiaoxian did not answer Zhui's question directly. Instead, he looked around and pointed at the ground 2 steps away. There's a rock about this big. Xiaoxian gestured, describing the size and shape of the rock. Zhui and the rest looked in the direction Xiaoxian was pointing at. There was a thick pile of rotten leaves. There were many fresh leaves and broken branches on top of it. Zhui looked at Xiaoxian. Tao Zheng nodded. Zhui hurried over and pulled out his knife. He peeled away the leaves and branches, digging through a thin layer of soil to find a rock. It was exactly as Xiaoxian had described. Seeing this, Yu's eyebrows kept rising. So accurate. Chapter 383. Xiaoxian proved his conjecture. The others believed Xiaoxian's words. What do you think? Tao Zheng looked at Zhui. Zhui buried the rock with leaves again. Since we've decided, let's hunt. The bone beast was a huge temptation to them. A hunter who did not want to hunt good prey was not a good warrior. After confirming the hunt, Tao Zheng and the others retreated. They planned to have a good discussion before starting the hunt. If it was any other prey, they would not have needed such a discussion. They could have just attacked. They had worked together many times and were familiar with each other. But this was their first time hunting a bone beast. It was not part of their original plan. They had to be prepared. Unfortunately, time waits for no one. Just as they were discussing the plan, a bird flew down from the sky. It swooped across the water and picked up a fish. It circled in the air, looking for a rock to rest on. Tao Zheng and the others stared nervously at the long-necked bird and silently chanted in their hearts, fly away quickly." But the bird refused to leave. It stared at the rocks by the river. It was picky, trying to decide which one was the most comfortable to eat on. Tao Zheng and the others watched as the long-necked bird flew towards the bone beast's head with the fish in its beak. Everyone roared in their hearts, "Idiot! How could you pick that one? Even a crooked tree would be better than that rock." When the bird stepped on the bone beast's head, Tao Zheng and the others despaired. They wanted to shoot the bird to the side. Some of them even closed their eyes. They could not bear to watch. They were not afraid to see the bird being eaten. They were afraid to shoot it again. Such a great opportunity was ruined by a stupid bird just like that. If the bird had chosen another rock, the bone beast might not have been interested in it and would have continued to lie in wait. But if there was a prey on its head, even if it was a small one, the bone beast would not let it go. Roar! The beast's head, which was originally like an ordinary boulder on the riverbank, cracked open its big mouth full of barb-like fangs and bit down on the long-necked bird that dared to step on its head. The muffled roars of the beasts and the sharp and shrill cries of the birds mixed together. The other birds in the surrounding forest were collectively frightened and flew away while chirping. The young clawed beast that was eating a leaf twitched its ears and turned its head. It abandoned the tree and ran away. The bird's screeching stopped. The fish that the bird had picked up fell to the ground. It struggled to jump back into the river but was crushed by the bone beast's claws. The bone beast that was lying in ambush under the sand was like a small mountain. Its huge body suddenly appeared, and its short and sharp claws made the stones on the ground squeak. With the long-necked bird in its mouth, the bone beast's slow breathing was like a rolling boulder, striking everyone's hearts. When they saw the bone beast from afar, they did not have such a clear understanding of it. Now that they were not that close, the feeling was stronger than before. Xiao Xian leaped onto a tree and looked at the bone beast that had revealed its true form. The bone beast and the dinosaurs looked similar, but that was only in terms of shape. Overall, they were very different. One was a vegetarian while the other was a carnivore. In terms of physique, the dino head was slightly fatter, while the bone beasts were more muscular. Compared to the dinosaur they caught before, it was like comparing a fat pig to a muscular bull. Of course, the bone beast's greatest defense was its stone-like bones. It was extremely resilient and made hunting it much more difficult. Tao Zheng and the rest whispered to each other as they watched the bone beast slowly munching on its food. "What should we do now?" someone asked. He was unwilling to give up. Attack? They did not have absolute confidence. Before they could come up with anything, something had already happened. How troublesome. Tao Zheng thought about it too. A few plans flashed through his mind, but he rejected them all. They were too dangerous. Even if they succeeded, there would be casualties in the team. That was not something he wanted to see. They were not at the point where they would risk their lives for a prey. Just as he was thinking, Tao Zheng felt someone bump into him. He looked over and saw Feng Zheng retracting his elbow. His eyes swept across the area, signaling Tao Zheng to pay attention. Tao Zheng looked over and saw Xiao Xian observing something in the tree. He lowered his voice and asked, "Xiao Xian, what do you think?" Tao Zheng had to listen to this young elder's opinion. After all, he was powerful and had status in the tribe. "I'll try," Xiao Xian said. "What?" Tao Zheng rubbed his ears, as if he was hallucinating. "I'll try." Xiao Xian came down from the tree. Everyone looked at Xiao Xian. They did not look at him mockingly, but they did not think it was a good idea either. "Don't underestimate the bone beast," Tao Zheng said seriously. Many giant beasts appeared to be large in size and slow in movement, but when you really faced them, you would realize how powerful they were. "I know." The long-necked bird was fast, but the bone beast would use even more speed to catch the bird. That would depend on how fast it could catch the bird. Xiao Xian had a basic understanding of the bone beast's muscles and strength when it emerged from the ground. I'll try first. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing, Xiao Xian said. Tao Zhengzhui and the rest relaxed when they heard Xiao Xian's words. They wondered if Xiao Xian had other abilities. Be careful. If you can't handle it, we'll go help and then retreat, Tao Zheng said. Okay. If I can't handle it, I'll tell you. But if I don't go, Xiao Xian added. Tao Zheng hesitated and nodded. Okay. Tao Zheng wanted to give his weapon to Xiao Xian, but Xiao Xian refused. Thanks. I have it with me. Xiao Xian patted his bag and walked to the riverbank. Seeing Xiao Xian leave, a young warrior asked Tao Zheng, what else does he have other than that black dagger? I don't know. Tao Zheng shook his head. That dagger is made of stone, right? Another warrior asked, worried. Tao Zheng sighed and stopped everyone from talking. Let's wait and see. Looking at Xiao Xian quietly approaching the riverbank, everyone couldn't help but praise him in their hearts. He looked like a veteran. Maybe he really had a way. Then they saw Xiao Xian hide in a tall tree by the riverbank. He paused for a while and then threw something out. It was not aimed at the bone beast. Was it a diversion? Everyone thought of a few strategies they had used before. They widened their eyes to watch and learn. But what happened next made their jaws drop. Xiao Xian charged out towards the bone beast. Seeing this scene, Tao Zheng wished he could vomit blood. Was this what you meant by, don't worry? Chapter 384. The clouds in the sky covered Yangguang and the ground darkened. The forest that covered Yangguang seemed to have quietened down. The trees beside the sandy land were tall and Xiao Xian was most satisfied with them. Xiao Xian had considered the type of tree, the wood quality, the strength of the roots, and so on. The time he spent on the tree was actually to find the best place to start. He would definitely be at a disadvantage if he fought against such a troublesome beast. Now he had to focus on hunting. Xiao Xian planned to try a trap. Today's weather and environment were perfect for a trap. Hiding in a tree, Xiao Xian looked at the beast lying on the shore. His mind was filled with ideas, combining the terrain and environment to form a complete trap. However, theory was just theory. He had to be careful when he put it into practice. Xiao Xian no longer wore his worm skin. He had used it to wrap the core seed in the desert for Tua and the rest to bring it back to the tribe. Without a bodyguard, he had to be more careful. If he got hurt, he would be at a disadvantage. The worm skin was gone, but the string was still there. Finding the first trap point, Xiao Xian threw the stone nail with the silk thread tied to it. The sound of the stone nails hitting the ground alerted the bone beast. Its bones shrunk in size, but they were sturdier than before. When it realized that it was only a puny human, it roared and swiped at him with its claws. Xiao Xian dodged, but he didn't go far. He swung his hand again, and the shrunken boomerang, tied with a silk thread, drew an arc and wrapped around a thick tree trunk on the edge of the sandy ground. Xiao Xian did not attack immediately. Although he had a few chances to cut the beast, it might not actually hurt the beast. At most, it would only break its skin. It might even enrage the beast. Xiao Xian did not want to take the risk. He could not predict what the beast would do in a fit of rage. There were too many uncertainties. Xiao Xian did not want to risk it. He dodged the beast's attacks nimbly. Every time it looked like he was about to be hit, he would dodge again. Tao Zheng and the rest watched Xiao Xian's movements, sweating. To them, Xiao Xian was really putting on a show of life and death. It was not Xiao Xian who was shocked, but Tao Zheng and the rest. If they were not careful, Xiao Xian would end up like the fish that was squashed by the beast. Xiao Xian dodged again and again. The beast was frustrated, swinging its arms harder and harder. Every time it swung its arms, a huge tree trunk would break. Even if it didn't break, there would be a huge hole. The canopy above was about to fall. Crack! Another tree was snapped. However, Xiao Xian did not attack immediately. Instead, he focused on dodging, leading the bone beast around. What is he doing? You could not help but ask. Tao Zheng and the rest were confused as well. Their initial anxiety had faded. Seeing how Xiao Xian dodged the beast's attacks, it was clear that he had the ability to dodge the beast's attacks, but he was still running around it. Let's keep watching. If we think something is wrong, Xiao Xian can escape. Plus, Xiao Xian did not ask us to interfere, Tao Zheng said. What is he throwing? Wu Zhan, who had been silent, asked, "A knife? A spear dart? Doesn't look like it. Why would he throw something other than his prey?" Tao Zheng shook his head. The thick clouds were still blocking Yangguang's view. The forest was dark and they could not see everything clearly. However, they could not get too close either. Not only would they disrupt Xiaoxian's plan, they would also expose themselves to the beast's attack range. Thus, even if they had their own guesses, they could not go closer to take a look. On the other side, Xiaoxian ran a few steps vertically up the tree trunk and leapt up. Below, the bone beast opened its mouth wide, revealing a mouthful of sharp hook-like teeth. Ah! A young warrior could not help but cry out. Moving in the air was not as easy as moving on land. It was difficult to dodge. Tao Zheng was about to rush over as well. Why didn't they ask for help at a time like this? Xiaoxian looked at the bone beast, who was waiting for its prey with its mouth wide open. He smiled. Sometimes the switch between predator and prey happened in the blink of an eye. He had fallen into the trap. Xiaoxian was getting closer and closer to the beast's mouth. He could smell the beast's bloody breath and see the bird feathers between its teeth. But just as the bone beast was about to open its mouth to swallow the prey jumped up again. The anxious Tao Zheng and the rest did not see Xiaoxian fall directly into the beast's open mouth. Instead, they saw Xiaoxian jump up again when he was close to the beast's mouth. He jumped up again? How was that possible? Everyone widened their eyes, trying to get a better look. On the other side, not only did Xiaoxian jump up, he was also jumping up step by step. It was as if there were stairs in the air. The bone beast wasn't the only one who was dumbfounded. Tao Zheng and the others had their eyes popping out of their sockets. How was that possible? The wind blew. In the sky, the thick layers of clouds drifted, and the sunlight that had been blocked was once again revealed little by little. The golden rays of light once again swept through the forest. Tao Zheng and the rest saw thin lines reflecting the golden light around the beast. Lines! Xiaoxian was jumping up by stepping on lines. Were those the lines he had thrown out earlier? But why would Xiaoxian make those lines? Lines of golden light surrounded the bone beast. Xiaoxian had already jumped to the most suitable height. His timing was perfect. A rock rolled into his palm and slid between his fingers. With a flick of his finger, Xiaoxian shot out the small stone. Boom! The sound of the taut threads vibrating could be heard. It was as if a switch had been flipped. Immediately after, a series of rapid cutting sounds burst out. It was like the ear-piercing sound of fingernails scratching hard objects, causing Tao Zheng and the others to have goosebumps all over their bodies. They couldn't help but tremble. Like a loose cocoon, the bone beast was tightly bound by strings. The beast struggled with brute force. The more it struggled, the sharper the sound. There seemed to be the smell of burning wood in the air. Boom! Boom! Along with several sounds, some of the tall trees around the sandy land were cut down. Some of them were cut off from the ground, while others were cut off from the tree crown. Roar! The bone beast's struggle broke a dozen trees, and it lost its balance and fell to the ground. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Xiaoxian didn't want to rely on these threads to completely tie up the beast. He just wanted to use this method to drag the beast down and trip it up. Xiaoxian was brought to a tree by the force of the silk thread. The totemic power in his body was at its peak, and even the mud on his face could not completely cover the exposed totemic patterns. The bulging muscles on his arms were constantly twitching, and his legs were gathering strength. His strength exploded in an instant, and the tree trunk under his feet made a soft cracking sound. His body was already pushed out. Xiaoxian was extremely fast. In a blink of an eye, he was in front of the beast and punched it. The beast that was tripped had just lifted its head when it saw the incoming punch. The shockwave from the punch made it squint its eyes. Boom! Tao Zheng and the others shuddered. They could tell from the sound of the punch that it was a powerful one. Zhui looked at the bone beast whose head was buried in the sand. He thought of the dino-head beast that was smashed into the ground back in the tribe. His facial muscles twitched. He did not see it with his own eyes back then. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, he was deeply moved. What a powerful punch! That, before Tao Zheng could finish his sentence, another punch came from the other side. The beast struggled to lift its head from the ground before it was smashed in again. Zhui, who had experienced Xiaoxian's strength before, was speechless. Tao Zheng and the others' jaws dropped to the ground. They wanted to raise their arms and cheer. All hail the elder. They watched as Xiaoxian rubbed his fists. He ran to the side and picked up a boulder that the beast was using to hide its head. He tossed it in the air and threw it again. The boulder cracked, but the beast's head was still fine. Still struggling. Fine again. Tao Zheng and the rest couldn't help but feel sorry for the bone beast when they saw Xiaoxian throw one rock after another at it. Why did he have to collect so many stones? He deserved it. Chapter 385. The beast was knocked out and it looked like it would be out for a long time. Even if it woke up soon, there was no need to worry. Xiaoxian would hit it again when he sensed something was wrong. Besides, other than Xiaoxian, Tao Zheng and the others were watching too. Tao Zheng and the others walked over shakily. After making sure that the beast was really unconscious, they got boulder and tied it up with vines. They specifically used vines that were thick and tough to break, trapping the beast like a cocoon. Its bulging mouth was also tied up. Other than breathing, the bone beast could not move freely. The most it could do was move its hooves. Xiaoxian watched as Tao Zheng and the others touched the beast here and there after tying it up. Some of the bolder ones even lifted the beast's mouth to look at its teeth. The unconscious beast's head muscles were relaxed. Other than the armor-like shell covering most of its body, parts like its mouth and nostrils were still soft. The weaknesses that had been sealed during battle were now exposed. After touching it, the group worked together to drag the unconscious beast to a resting place. Although the hunting teams had split up to hunt, the resting place was still the same. They had to carry such a huge beast to a resting place before hunting other prey. The beast was huge, but the Yinjiao people were strong too. If one person could not carry it, they would pull it together. If they could not carry it, they would carry it together. Xiaoxian, is everyone in your tribe as strong as you? Are there a lot of advanced totemic warriors our age? Tao Zheng asked after a while. The others with Tao Zheng also looked at Xiaoxian. Most of them lived near the top of the mountain, so they knew more than the others. Some of the information came from their own inquiries, while some came from their elders. For example, they learned about Xiaoxian's true origins from their elders. It was no wonder Tao Zheng asked that. If they knew that the other Yinjiao tribe was as strong as Xiaoxian, they would be under a lot of pressure. They used to think that they were strong in their own tribe, but Xiaoxian's appearance was a huge shock. Xiaoxian smiled and shook his head when he heard Tao Zheng's question. No, there aren't many young advanced totemic warriors. However, there are still many powerful people. Tao Zheng and the others relaxed when they heard Xiaoxian say that there were not many advanced totemic warriors. As expected, there were not many people like Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian was an elder after all. He was the only elder in all the Yinjiao tribes combined. Along the way, if they found other prey that they were satisfied with, they would put the bone beast down and go hunting. After all, they could carry more prey with them. Xiaoxian gave the others the chance to hunt while he watched over the beast in case it woke up and caused trouble. While Tao Zheng and the rest were hunting, Xiaoxian noticed the bone beast was waking up. He found a large rock nearby and hit it hard to make it faint again. Resting place. After a day of hunting, many hunting groups would go there to take a rest. Some of them who had gone further away might spend the night outside, but most of them would still go to the resting place, so that they could sleep peacefully. The tribe's resting place in this forest was on a mountain. The trees on the mountain were not too dense. There were caves, both natural and man-made. They could store some smaller prey and were enough for everyone in the hunting team to take a rest. The easier prey would be slaughtered in other places and then moved into the cave. The more troublesome prey, such as the dino head from last time, would be tied up and brought back. Then, everyone would discuss how to divide it. A few tribesmen stood outside the rested area, keeping an eye on the forest in case other beasts attacked. The people standing on higher ground saw movement in the forest and whistled to the people below, signaling them to pay attention. Soon they realized that it wasn't a ferocious beast that had attacked. Instead, it was their own people who had brought their prey over, and it was a big guy. When the tribesmen got closer, they realized it was Tao Zheng's group. Everyone in the tribe knew how strong Tao Zheng and the others were. Every time they went hunting, Tao Zheng's team would always catch a lot of good prey. There was no point in being envious. After all, their strength was there. Tao Zheng, Zhui, and Wu Zhan, these three outstanding young warriors, were famous even in other tribes. Tao Zheng, what did you hunt this time? The guard outside was about to ask Tao Zheng, who was walking at the front, but when he saw the prey they brought out, he was so shocked that he stopped talking. Bone beast. The two guards shouted in shock. What? Bone beast. The others heard and ran over to take a look. It wasn't that no one had ever caught a bone beast before. It was just that compared to other prey it was too rare. Most of the time they spent a lot of time and effort only to end up with nothing. If they weren't careful, they would pay a heavy price. To their surprise, Tao Zheng's team managed to hunt a bone beast this time. They counted the number of people in the team. None of them were missing. Not even the slightest bit of injury. Under everyone's gazes, Tao Zheng and the others couldn't help blushing. They hadn't hunted the bone beast, and they hadn't even had a chance to attack it. As for the small injuries on their bodies, they were from hunting other prey. They had nothing to do with the bone beast. Elder Xiaoxian caught it, said Tao Zheng. The others didn't believe him. To them, how could Xiaoxian hunt this beast alone? This wasn't a baby bone beast. But with Tao Zheng's team explaining, the others were curious too. They helped to move the bone beast to a safer spot and asked curiously. There were 3 girls in Tao Zheng's group. They didn't have to be so tense and were much more active. Lin, did Xiaoxian really hunt this beast? One of the warriors asked. Of course. The girl named Lin excitedly told the others about Xiaoxian's hunt. Xiaoxian had already been pulled aside by Duokong for questioning. Duokong didn't care if he could hunt a bone beast or not. He had hunted one when he was younger, but it was done as a team. Right now, Duokong was more concerned about Xiaoxian's condition and whether he was injured. The chief and shamaness had warned him before they left. They asked about the details of the hunt and Xiaoxian answered all of them. Duokong was relieved when he heard that Xiaoxian had adapted well. He even asked Xiaoxian to learn about the herbs they brought back from the hunt. Xiaoxian had learned about herbs from Jiju. The plants in the forest were unfamiliar. Different places had different types of plants. After learning about the herbs and eating barbecued meat, everyone fell asleep after a day of hunting. The guards outside took turns to keep watch. After a good night's sleep, they woke up the next day feeling relaxed and not tired at all. Xiaoxian walked out of the cave and looked at the forest in the distance. He took a deep breath, stretched his arms and stretched his body. Naturally, there would be people guarding the prey in the hunting grounds. They were all experienced hunters, so Xiaoxian didn't have to worry. The next day's hunt was about to begin. They had to continue hunting. As winter approached, there would be fewer animals. They had to be prepared. Chapter 386. Every year when winter approached, the tribe would go out to hunt more frequently. If it weren't for the limited manpower, they would definitely hunt for longer periods of time. Because every year when winter approached, the tribe would prepare animal skins and let people take them to the slave owners to sell, and then buy some other things. When the weather turned cold, the slave owners who lived far away from the mountains and forests would have an increased demand for animal skins. Relying on their slaves alone, they couldn't prepare much good stuff, so they still had to get it from the tribesmen. Especially those with good fur and good leather, the price of selling them was more than twice as high as other times. Food, bronze, and other things that the tribe couldn't produce themselves, they would use this method to exchange for them. If the family had the means, they would buy some rare things from the slave owners and bring them back. All of this required the support of prey. Before going to bed yesterday, Xiaoxian heard many people in the team discussing what to exchange for furs. They also asked Xiaoxian, but Xiaoxian hadn't been to the slave owner's territory, so he couldn't say why. He could only wait and see. On the second day of hunting, before the sun was completely out, each team had already set off. Following Tao Zheng's team, Xiaoxian quickly passed through the mountains. Sometimes, after a short pause, Tao Zheng would introduce some of the surrounding terrain to Xiaoxian. This was the hunting route that their team often took. Xiaoxian memorized all the dangerous places, ferocious beasts, and dangerous or medicinal plants around. When they passed by a dry river, Xiaoxian's footsteps suddenly stopped and looked over there. Seeing Xiaoxian stop, the others also stopped. After yesterday's hunting, the people in the team wouldn't underestimate Xiao Xian. In terms of strength, even the stubborn Zhuai had to admit that Xiao Xian was a little stronger than them. What's wrong? Tao Zheng asked. Looking at the dry riverbed, they didn't find anything strange. They had been here many times and were very familiar with it. Xiao Xian stared in that direction. You guys wait here. I'll go take a look. With that, he quickly walked over. There were no dangerous fierce beasts around, so Tao Zheng simply walked over and asked, What did you find? Xiao Xian remained silent. He wasn't sure either. The riverbed here was 20 to 30 meters wide, and it seemed to be wider in the distance, but it was not deep. During the rainy season, the river will rise, but at the end of the year, the river level will drop and dry up. Tao Zheng explained to Xiao Xian, There's water here most of the year, but it's only dry at the end of the year. But when there's water here, we won't get close, because there are some dangerous fish here. Xiao Xian walked to the side and didn't go down. He looked at the dry riverbed, but if he stepped in, he would sink right in. The bottom was soft mud, but the top of the mud was dry and cracked. Weeds grew out of the cracks in the mud, and they were growing quite well. However, Xiao Xian wasn't interested in that. His target was the rocks on the riverbed. Do you have a spear? Let me borrow it. Xiao Xian turned around and asked someone to lend him a tool. Use mine. Duo Li hurriedly handed over the spear he always carried. Thanks. Xiao Xian took the spear and picked up the nearest rock on the riverbed. The stones exposed from the riverbed were lifted up high by the spearhead and flew towards Xiao Xian. After catching the rock, Xiao Xian wiped away some of the dry mud on the surface of the rock and carefully examined it. He rubbed his fingers on the rock to feel it. What's different about these rocks? Tao Zheng asked. In his opinion, these rocks were no different from other rocks. They weren't big either, so they couldn't be made into stone tools. Xiao Xian shook his head. It's just a guess. After picking up 2 more rocks, Xiao Xian put the 3 fist-sized rocks into his animal skin bag. Then he walked along the riverbed and looked into the distance. The scary fish you're talking about, the ones with hard scales, sharp teeth for claws, and a long tail. Are they the ones that can swim in the water and walk on land? Xiao Xian asked. Before Tao Zheng could answer, Duo Li and the others nodded. Yes, that's it. Xiao Xian, you've seen them before? At first they wanted to hunt some of those fish, but then they realized that they were too dangerous and there were too many of them. So, when the weather was warm and the water level in the river rose, they would avoid this place. At the end of the year, when the river dried up and the fish left, they would come back. Touching the animal skin bag with the rocks, Xiao Xian asked again, Where does this river lead to? The others didn't know the answer to this question, but Tao Zheng did. He heard it from an old hunter who used to come here. It said that there's an even wider river ahead. That river can cut through the entire forest. If you follow that river, you might see the sea. But it's too far and no one in the tribe has seen it before. I only heard it from some tribesmen who came from there. Into the sea? Xiao Xian lowered his head and thought. Xiao Xian stopped because he felt that the rocks on the bed looked familiar. He held one in his hand and felt that the texture was familiar too. That year, when he brought the tribe across the river and left the drumming tribe, a crocodile gave him a rock. It was said that the drumming tribe's water moonstones came from that rock. The drumming tribe had never been here before, so they couldn't have anything to do with this place. But crocodiles were different. Maybe the drumming tribe's crocodiles wouldn't come here, but what about other crocodiles? Were there other crocodiles like the drumming tribe that picked up rocks from the sea and spat them into the river? That was hard to say. Let's go, Xiao Xian said. The team still had to continue hunting. They couldn't be delayed because of him. Duo Li looked at the leaving team and the rocks on the bed. He ran over and picked one up with his spear. Ever since he saw Xiao Xian fight the bone beast alone, Duo Li was impressed by this young elder who wasn't much older than him. He believed in Xiao Xian's abilities. Since Xiao Xian thought that the rocks were strange, he brought one himself to study. Maybe he could find something. The others saw what Duo Li did and wondered if they should bring one too. But the team had already left and it wasn't convenient to go back. Whatever, they'd come back next time. There was still one more hunt before winter anyway. Other than Xiao Xian's unique way of hunting the bone beast on the first day, they went back to their old ways for the next few days. The Yinjiao people valued individual ability, but they also valued teamwork. Xiao Xian, Tao Zheng and the rest hunted some good prey. Other than that, Xiao Xian also used vines to weave a net and caught a few tapirs. The tapirs they caught were one of the smaller species of tapirs. They were normal animals that could be eaten. They were very timid and would run away at the slightest movement. They hid in a hidden spot with dense foliage and only came out when the danger was over. They had different colored patterns on their skin and looked like they were wearing camouflage clothing. When they hid in the bushes, it was hard to spot them. The babies of these tapirs were even more timid, so they weren't as curious as other animals. They would stick close to their mother and never leave alone. This way of survival allowed this seemingly harmless species to survive until now. Tao Zheng and the rest didn't care about prey like these, but Xiao Xian caught one. It was a female tapir with a litter of babies. When they were discovered, they were being chased by predators and ran into Xiao Xian's net. Xiao Xian caught them all. Xiao Xian didn't eat these normal animals. He caught them as gifts. Hunting time was over and the teams were almost done with their prey. It was time to return to the tribe. Everyone gathered at the resting area and sorted out the prey of their respective teams before carrying them back. The route from the resting area to the tribe overlapped with the route of the Taiha tribe. Although the territories of the two tribes were different, and the hunting areas were also different, this section of the road was shared. It was flat and easy to walk on, suitable for teams with prey. The path was made by walking. The hunting teams of the two tribes often stepped on it, and the trees and grass in the way were all cut down. Duokong was in a good mood because of the good harvest and the successful hunt. He opened his mouth and roared. The others also sang along. With so many people singing together, the burst of energy had a certain deterrent effect on the nearby beasts. No beasts came close. When they went out, they weren't so arrogant because they didn't want to chase away their prey. But when they came back, they didn't have to worry. At the Y-shaped intersection, the Taiha people were carrying their prey onto the shared path. When they heard the singing from the Yinjiao team, the leader was disgusted. Why are we meeting them again? His good mood had been ruined. Leader. Yinjiao, don't worry about them. The leader's face was wooden. Keep walking and pretend they don't exist. However, the Yinjiao people's presence was too strong. They couldn't ignore them even if they wanted to. When the Flaming Horn tribesmen reached the public walkway from the other side of the road, the two teams met up. Duokong glanced at the prey brought by the Taiha team and let out a strange laugh. Heh. The Taiha team leader's face darkened. What, are you looking down on us? Oh no, I'm not looking down on you. Really, Duokong said. Then he turned around and yelled, Duoli, take your prey and walk faster. Why are you taking so long with that small amount of prey? The people behind him didn't say anything. They seemed to have formed a tacit agreement. After Duokong said that, Xiao Xian noticed that the people in the team were energized. Then, Duo Li and the others carried the bone beast and walked quickly to the front of the team. Seeing the huge bone beast, the Taiha people were speechless. The leader's face twitched and turned green. Xiao Xian was happy to see this. He carried the prey and chased after them. On the other side, the Taiha team leader was about to retort when he heard an ah behind him. He forgot what he wanted to say. What ah? The leader turned around and roared. Ignoring the leader's expression, a young warrior jumped out and pointed at Xiao Xian. Leader. It's him. Chapter 387. The leader of the Taiha tribe was stunned for a moment, but he quickly realized what "it's him" meant. The clear fruit. The person who stole their clear fruit was the young man in the Yinjiao team carrying a pile of prey. Stop! The leader of the Taiha tribe roared and took 2 big steps towards Xiao Xian. He was so agitated that the veins on his neck bulged. When the Taiha people moved, Duokong moved too. He turned and blocked their path. What, you want to steal the prey? The Yinjiao people all stopped and looked at the Taiha tribe. It looked like they were waiting for Duokang's order, and they would immediately throw down their prey and start fighting. The Taiha tribe. The leader of the Taiha tribe tried to control himself, but this was not the time to fight. He suppressed his anger and pointed at Xiao Xian. He asked Duokong, who was blocking his path. Who is he? As Yinjiao's neighbors, the Taiha tribe did not know Yinjiao very well, but they knew a lot about Yinjiao. They would compare people and events to each other. For example, Yinjiao's outstanding young warriors like Tao Zhengzhui, Wu Zhan, etc. The Taiha tribe knew about them, but Xiao Xian, the young man who stole their things, they had no impression of him at all. Duokong already knew why the Taiha tribesman reacted this way. He snorted, "It's none of your business." Then Duokong called his team and left, leaving the Taiha tribe to sulk. They were not as good as him and their things were stolen. They could only admit defeat. But that person, the leader of the Taiha tribe, decided to talk to their chief about this when they got back. They did not expect Yinjiao to be hiding someone. On the other side, Xiao Xian had already learned about the clear fruit from Guang Yi. So that's the clear fruit. It had been some time since the incident. After finding the tribe, Xiao Xian put all his attention on the tribe and completely forgot that he had snatched the clear fruit from others. Sometimes he would think about it, but soon he would be delayed by other things. Moreover, when they were in the tribe, the chief and the others never asked Xiao Xian to take out the fruit. They just put it aside and forgot about it. "I left it at home. I'll bring it to you when we get back," Xiao Xian said. There's no need. Since you got it, it's yours." Duokong quickly waved his hand. Guang Yi had the same idea. "I don't have much use for it. It would be more effective to distribute it to the warriors in the tribe." After knowing the effects of the clear fruit, Xiao Xian didn't plan to keep all of them for himself. He decided to distribute them when he got back. The hunting team was warmly welcomed by the tribesmen. On the artificial river outside, a 10-meter-wide bridge made of thick tree trunks had been lowered. Some people came over to help carry the prey. Everyone was very happy when they heard that the hunt was fruitful. After moving the bone beast up the mountain, Xiao Xian gave the nest of tapers he caught to Zhao Ming and his brother's house. After all, when he first arrived, he stayed at their house for a night. When he heard that Xiao Xian gave them a nest of food, Zhao Ming didn't even bother to wipe the mud off his body. He ran home to take a look. There was an elder at the foot of the mountain who knew more about tapers. He told Zhao Ming to raise the nest of tapers and eat them when they were big enough. It didn't cost much anyway. If there wasn't a mother around, the baby tapers might not be able to survive. But with a mother around, it was much easier. They eat young twigs, young leaves, and fruits. Oh, and by the river in front of the tribe, they also eat the grass that grows near the water. An auntie who had tried raising tapers before shared her experience with Zhao Ming. Xiao Xian helped build a circle before he was called up the mountain. The hunting team had to split the prey, and the shamaness wanted to talk to him about something. Xiao Xian also shared some of the bone beast with Xiao Xian's team since they helped carry it. When Xiao Xian couldn't take care of it, they were the ones who kept an eye on the unconscious beast. After splitting the prey, Xiao Xian didn't go back immediately. Instead, he went to the shamaness. It was much quieter in front of the shamaness gate. No matter how happy the warriors were, they would lower their voices when they passed by, worried that they'd disturb the shamaness. "You're here." The shamaness glanced at Xiao Xian and put down the animal skin scroll. She waved, gesturing for Xiao Xian to follow her into the house. There were no windows in the room that was used to store things. If they wanted to see clearly, they would have to light a torch. But the shamaness didn't light a fire. She went straight to a table with a box on it. The shamaness came out with the box and handed it to Xiao Xian. "Take these." Xiao Xian recognized the box. He opened it and saw 3 elders' bone ornaments. "All for me." Xiao Xian was shocked. "Yes." The shamaness nodded and sighed. "The ancestors would be more willing to give them to you." On the day of the welcoming ceremony, the 3 bone ornaments did light up. But after the ceremony, they dimmed again. They weren't as dim as before, but they couldn't compare to the one Xiao Xian was wearing. Ever since Yinjiao's 2 tribes separated, the bone ornaments never lit up again. There were no more elders in the tribe. Xiao Xian was an exception. Seeing Xiao Xian hesitate, the shamaness said, "If the 2 tribes reunite in the future and a new elder appears, it won't be too late to take them out." "No, I'm worried about losing them," Xiao Xian said. The shamaness' face twitched. She said in a low voice, "Then wear them." "Can't I leave them at home?" "No." Seeing that Xiaoxian still wanted to say something, the shamaness stomped her cane. Wear them now. Okay. There was a protrusion on the back of each bone ornament. There was a hole in the protrusion for a rope. Xiaoxian took off the bone ornament necklace he was wearing, untied the rope and strung the other 3 on. Then he tied the rope and put it back on. The difference was obvious when the 4 of them were put together. Compared to the one Xiaoxian always wore, the ball in the middle was much dimmer. However, after Xiaoxian put the necklace back on, the shamaness noticed that the ball in the middle of the 3 bone ornaments was brightening at a speed visible to the naked eye, until it was the same as the previous one. Seeing this, the shamaness felt relieved. Sure enough, she had to put the bone ornaments in Xiaoxian's hands. Wearing the 4 bone ornaments, Xiaoxian came out from the shamaness place. He picked some of the game he had hunted and asked someone to help him cook meat soup. There was no big pot, so Xiaoxian went to take out the big stone pot that had always been in the tribe's warehouse. It was made by the ancestors of the tribe when they came here. Sometimes when the tribe held large-scale celebrations, they would take out the big stone pot and cook a big pot for everyone to share. The first day they cooked on the mountain, the second day on the mountainside, and the third day at the foot of the mountain. They cooked for 3 days in a row. Xiaoxian hunted so much game that he couldn't finish it all by himself. Besides, he originally wanted to hunt more to share with everyone. As for the clear fruit, after Xiaoxian cut it open, he found about 20 small seeds inside. He took half of it to the chief as a gift from Xiaoxian to the tribe. The other half was kept by Xiaoxian. If anyone needed it in the future, they could exchange it with Xiaoxian. After settling those matters, Xiaoxian finally had some free time. He returned to the house and took out the 3 stones he brought back from the dry riverbed to study them. On the table next to the window, Xiaoxian washed the 3 stones and placed them in a well-lit area. He carefully examined them and scraped them with a knife. The hardness was similar to the stone he got from Mute Crocodile. The quality and color of the stones were very similar, but he still couldn't tell if they were the same as the drumming tribe's water moon stones. After all, there was no drumming tribe here, so these stones couldn't have become water moon stones, right? There was no other way. Xiaoxian let out a long sigh. He turned one of the stones in his hand and recalled the harvest of water moon stones when he was in the drumming tribe. Speaking of which, the reason why the water moon stones could be successfully transformed was because of the fire seed. As he was thinking, Xiaoxian's expression suddenly froze. He immediately gathered his thoughts and observed the changes in his mind. In his mind, the totemic flame was still there, but the shell covering it was different. It was flashing. The light shield outside the fire seed flashed. Every time it flashed, it became brighter. At the same time, Xiaoxian could feel a thin thread extending out from the shell. The thread traveled along Xiaoxian's arm to his palm, then to the stone. Rustle, rustle, rustle. It was like the sound of fine particles falling. It was the same sound that Xiaoxian had heard when he was at the water moon channel of the drumming tribe. Chapter 388. When the buzzing stopped, the line in his mind was retracted. Xiaoxian looked at the stone in his hand. Just a moment ago it looked very ordinary, but now it was as smooth as a peeled boiled egg. The crystal had a slight coolness to it, very similar to the water moon stone. Just as he was about to move, Xiaoxian suddenly felt his vision go dark. It was like standing up after a long period of squatting. The blood circulation in the body was blocked, and the brain was deprived of oxygen, causing dizziness. He was a little tired, but after a few breaths he felt much better. Xiaoxian looked at the stone in his hand again. It looked similar to the water moon stone. Although there were slight differences in color and transparency, it was not much different. Was it really a water moon stone? Yangguang was just right outside the window, illuminating the room. Xiaoxian closed the window and closed the door. The room suddenly darkened. If it was a water moon stone in such a dim environment, it would definitely emit a sparkling light. However, it turned out that it was not the same. The stone in Xiaoxian's hand also emitted light, but the light it emitted was very dim. It could not illuminate the room at all. If there was an animal skin scroll with words written on it next to this stone, it might not be able to see the words clearly. This kind of brightness could not be compared to a water moon stone. However, knowing that it was similar to a water moonstone was still useful information for Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian did not immediately turn the other two stones into the same state. He planned to sit down and rest first. He had used a lot of energy to make the stone just now, so he felt very tired. At this time, someone knocked on the door. "Elder Xiao Xian, are you there? The chief wants to see you." Someone shouted outside the room. Xiao Xian responded and put the stone on the table. He opened the window and patted some dust off his hands. This was left behind when the stone was formed. Getting up and opening the door, Xiao Xian followed the other person to the chief. Xiao Xian placed the crystal on the table by the window. The yangguang outside the window shone in and shone on the stone. The entire stone seemed to be bathed in a layer of warm light. On the other side, Xiao Xian was called to the chief's place. When he entered the house, there were already many people there, similar to the last time he came. Duo Kong, Guang Yi and other important members of the hunting team, as well as a few respected elders of the tribe, were all sitting there. There were a few more people from the hunting group, but the shaman did not join in the fun. "Xiao Xian, come over here." Chief Zheng Luo pointed at the seat next to him. In the past, this seat belonged to the shaman. Even if the shaman didn't come, no one dared to sit there. This was the first time Duo Kong and the others had seen someone sitting in that position, and the shamaness and the leader didn't even say anything. As an elder, he had the right to do so. This time, Zhang Luo had called Xiao Xian over to discuss the trade at the slave owner's territory. They would not go to the royal city. Ever since they got into trouble there, they had not been there all these years. However, they still went to other cities a few times a year. It was impossible for everyone to go, so they were here to discuss the list of people who would go, as well as some things to take note of. This kind of meeting would be held twice before departure. Today was an impromptu meeting, so they didn't inform them beforehand. "I heard that there's more demand for white animal skins this year. Do you have any white animal skins left? Sort them out properly and raise the price when the time comes." The chief told everyone what he heard. After hunting, the tribesmen would hoard the fur they didn't need. White fur was their least favorite. First, it was easy to get dirty, and second, it was too conspicuous. Wearing it in the forest was like looking for death. However, white beasts were rare in the forest, and most of them appeared in the winter, or in the snowy mountains further away. Who would go there for no reason? "Chief, do you still want spotted ones?" Duokong asked, rubbing his hands. Their family had hoarded a lot of spotted animal skins this year. Last year, the slave owners liked this color, so they sold it at a high price. As for the other colors, they kept it for themselves. Well, Zheng Luo thought about what he heard. "I heard that they don't like it this year." Duokong stopped rubbing his hands, the smile on his face crumbling. "Why do they change every year?" Zheng Luo ignored Duokang's annoyance and turned to Xiao Xian. "Xiao Xian, you came to the tribe late, so you didn't hoard much. You don't have anything to sell, but you can come and take a look. You can help everyone when the time comes." Zheng Luo hoped that Xiao Xian could learn more about the situation here. But he was also worried that Xiao Xian wouldn't have anything to sell. If Xiao Xian went there and saw the other people in the tribe selling happily, Xiao Xian wouldn't feel good just by looking at them. "Don't worry, I know." Xiao Xian smiled. Duokong and Guang Yi looked up at Xiao Xian at the same time, but didn't say anything. After the meeting, the chief invited everyone for a meal. The meat was the bone beast meat that Xiao Xian brought out. They ate, drank, and chatted. Although there weren't many seasonings here, the tribesmen were smart enough to add some fruits and leaves to the soup. Tasted good. Xiao Xian had to learn from them. "I haven't eaten it in so many years, it still tastes the same," an elder said, smacking his lips. Another elder also talked about how they hunted bone beasts years ago. He even told Xiao Xian where the bones could be used. Xiao Xian stayed at the top of the mountain until sunset. It was getting dark before he returned to his house. However, when he returned, he found many people surrounding his house. "What's going on?" Xiao Xian asked. "Hey Xiao Xian, you're finally back." Duoli squeezed through the crowd and ran over excitedly. "Elder Xiao Xian, what's that in your house?" Although the house wasn't locked, they didn't dare to enter. Even if the windows were open, they wouldn't dare to pick up the glowing thing. They weren't close enough to Xiao Xian to take things from him. Besides, Xiao Xian was an elder, second only to the shaman and the chief. How could they just take things from an elder's house? That was why they could only suppress their curiosity when they saw the glowing stone. Now that Xiaoxian was back, they were all excited. In the house. Xiaoxian didn't quite understand. He looked towards the house and understood. Although there were many people blocking the view, they could still see the light coming from the windows. Water moonstone. No, that wasn't it. The light wasn't exactly the same as the water moonstone. The color of the light was less cold and had a hint of warmth. The crowd in front of him was curious. When they saw Xiaoxian coming over, they quickly made way and fought to ask their own questions. Without answering the chattering cha-cha, Xiaoxian opened the door and walked over to pick up the crystal on the table. Even Xiaoxian was puzzled. It wasn't like this before he left. The stone wasn't this bright during the day. Why was it so bright at night? It was almost as bright as the water moon stone. He looked at the other two stones on the table. They were still two very ordinary stones. They didn't shine at all and were inconspicuous. Seeing Duo Li and the others craning their necks to look at them with expectant and curious eyes, Xiaoxian passed the crystal to them. When the crystal was in Xiaoxian's hands, the others didn't dare to touch it. But when Duo Li took it, everyone started fighting for it. Especially those who were close to Duo Li. They all squeezed over wanting to take a look for themselves. It wasn't good to make a ruckus in front of Xiaoxian. Duo Li hurriedly spoke to Xiaoxian. After Xiaoxian agreed, he took the stone to a more spacious area outside the house and left with the noisy crowd. Once the crowd left, the surroundings became much quieter. Xiaoxian sat by the table and picked up the other two stones, wondering what was going on. Chapter 389. After a while, Duo Li returned the crystal to Xiaoxian. He was quite reluctant to give it back, as he felt that it would be much more convenient to have a glowing crystal at night, much more convenient than lighting a fire. More importantly, he had never seen it before. It was his first time seeing it and he felt that it was very rare. Xiaoxian, where did you get this crystal? Duo Li asked curiously. Yes, Elder Xiaoxian, where did you find this stone? Can you tell us about it? Even Tao Zheng and the others came over. Before this, they had never seen Xiaoxian take out something like this. They had heard of glowing stones, but they had never seen one with their own eyes. It was said that the slave masters had some of these things, but they didn't know where they got them. Xiaoxian took the crystal and said, "This stone." Everyone pricked up their ears. I picked it out from the dried river that day. As he spoke, Xiaoxian took the other two stones from the table and showed them to them. Because of the glowing crystal, the room seemed to be lit by a small table lamp, illuminating the two stones Xiaoxian took out very clearly. How is this possible? Duo Li exclaimed. This is it. Tao Zheng picked up the other two stones. No matter how he looked at them, he couldn't see any difference between these two stones and the glowing one. Xiaoxian nodded. How did it change? Cut it open? No, it's useless to cut it open. As for how it changed, I actually don't understand it either, Xiaoxian said. He really didn't understand, so naturally he couldn't explain it to them. They asked a few more questions about the glowing stone. As the night deepened, Duo Li and the others reluctantly left. After everyone left, Xiaoxian had time to study the stones again. This glowing stone wasn't so bright during the day. At that time it was placed. Xiaoxian thought for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the table, then the window and then outside. Yangguang? Or could it be that this stone only glows at night? Regardless of the situation, Xiaoxian intended to try again. Weren't there still two more stones? He would find the answer if he tried again. Picking up one of the remaining two stones, Xiaoxian mobilized the totemic power in his body. However, when the totemic power in his body was active, it was not the totemic flame that worked, but the light shield that covered the totemic flame. When the light shield lit up, even the totemic flames that had been rolling inside would appear much more subdued. A ray of light extended from the light shield and flowed through Xiaoxian's body from head to toe. It then flowed along his arm to the stone in his hand. This time Xiaoxian paid close attention to its changes. He could clearly feel that the outer layer of the stone in his hand had been peeled off. With a rustling sound, the outer layer of the stone shattered into a layer of powder and fell to the ground. Xiao Xian didn't need to personally brush it off. The powder naturally fell off, leaving only the crystal behind. However, the new crystal did not glow. It was not even as bright as the first stone during the day. Could it be that it really needed the sun? After bringing back 3 stones, Xiao Xian planned to leave the 3rd stone until the sun came out tomorrow to try again. Just like the first stone, after transforming the 2nd stone, Xiao Xian also felt a wave of exhaustion. He sat in the same spot for a while before packing up and going to sleep. However, while Xiao Xian slept well, some people didn't. For example, Duo Li, who had also brought back a stone, was studying the stone in the house. He was so noisy that his father, Duo Kong, woke up in the middle of the night and beat him up before he quieted down. However, he was only slightly quieter and gentler in his actions. When the sun came out the next day, Xiao Xian placed the non-glowing crystal that he had transformed last night where Yangguang was. Then he used the same method to transform the 3rd stone. When Xiao Xian tried the 3rd stone, it was under the sun. He held the stone with his palm facing upwards so that it was fully in contact with Yangguang. After the transformation, Xiao Xian brought the stone into the house and closed the doors and windows to block out the light. Sure enough, the 3rd stone was able to glow in the dark house. Although it wasn't very bright, it was much better than the previous 2 stones. The only difference was that it was in contact with more Yangguang during the transformation. As for the stone that didn't glow last night, after Yangguang placed it in the dark for a while, it shone brightly. Although it wasn't as bright as the drumming tribe's water moon stone, it wasn't any weaker than the first stone. Xiao Xian. Elder Xiao Xian. Duo Li hurriedly ran over. What's wrong? Xiao Xian asked when he saw Duo Li sweating profusely from his anxiety. This? Duo Li took out the stone in his hand, his face dejected. It's broken. Yesterday, he only wanted to study it carefully to see if he could make a stone like Xiao Xian's. But in a moment of carelessness, he broke the stone into pieces. I only wanted to cut off a little bit. But who knew that this stone would break into pieces like this? Duo Li said. Xiao Xian looked at the broken stone in his hand and said, this requires totemic power, not brute force. It was his own fault for not reminding him. Xiao Xian handed one of the 3 crystals to Duo Li. Take this. The other 2 changed too? Duo Li held the crystal in his hand like it was a treasure. Thinking of something, Xiao Xian asked Duo Li, are there very few glowing stones here? Yes, very few. Duo Li said. I heard that when people from other tribes found glowing stones like this, they would sell them to slave masters in exchange for a lot of food and gold. That was strange. Xiao Xian fell into deep thought. When he was there, although many people liked the water moonstone and it was almost a universal currency, it wasn't rare to this extent. There were other glowing stones too, but they were much rarer than the water moonstone. Why was it that after the people here merged with the fire seed, their abilities increased, but many special things disappeared completely? Could it be that it was because of the fire seed? People gathered all the power of the fire seed in their bodies, so they couldn't obtain the stones and couldn't change them? With this question in mind, Xiao Xian went to find the shamaness. After hearing this, she frowned and thought for a long time. It was ironic. As tribesmen, they had never seen a fire seed. If this was on the other side of the sea, other than the wanderers, the other tribesmen wouldn't believe it. But here it was true. No tribe had a fire seed burning in their fire pit. The people of the Flaming Horn tribe could only see the totemic flame in their minds. However, they had never seen the flame that their ancestors brought over. No matter if it was stormy, rainy or snowy weather, it would still burn in the fire pit without any firewood. They had never seen it with their own eyes. They only knew about it through the drawings their ancestors left behind. Even if the shamaness could see more through the Wu roll, it was far from being as clear as the real thing. The shamaness couldn't give Xiao Xian a definite answer, so Xiao Xian could only find the answer himself. After giving the remaining 2 glowing stones to the shamaness and the chief, Xiao Xian decided to go into the forest again and bring back more stones. Knowing that Xiao Xian was going to dig for stones, Duo Li, Taozheng and the others were more enthusiastic than the other. Almost everyone in the hunting team came over, including Duo Kong and Guang Yi. They said they had to protect them in case they ran into trouble, but in reality they were curious too. They wanted to know where the stones came from. This time there weren't many people going out. They didn't bring along tools for setting traps, but large bags and tightly woven nets. The Taiha tribesmen who had been observing Yanjiao quickly reported this to their superiors. But no matter what, they couldn't guess what the Yanjiao people were up to. Did they find some treasure? The Taiha tribesmen didn't understand. On the other side, the people who went into the forest had a clear goal. They weren't hunting, so they didn't pay attention to anything else. Even if a fat dinosaur walked past, they didn't give it a second glance. Compared to the dinosaur and other meaty beasts, they were more interested in the glowing stones. If they could get their hands on those glowing stones, they could exchange them for more bronze weapons from the slave masters. That was the most important thing. They rushed to the dried-up riverside. Duo Kong saw all kinds of weeds growing on the riverbed and the ordinary stones. He couldn't believe it. That's it. This was completely different from the gemstones with halos he imagined. He was wondering why they hadn't seen any of these stones before, but Xiaoxian found them the moment he arrived. These stones had a common face. If it wasn't for Xiaoxian, they wouldn't have found these treasures even if they walked 1,000,000 times. That's it. Duoli couldn't take it anymore. He took out a long wooden pole that he had prepared earlier. There was a shovel-like object at the front of the pole. He shoveled and lifted the stones from the riverbed to the bank. Xiaoxian hadn't done anything yet, but the others were already busy. They had a clear division of labor. Some were in charge of scooping up the stones, while the others were in charge of picking them up. The dried mud on the riverbed was poked here and there by the wooden pole. The dried upper layer cracked open and some of the soil was pushed aside, revealing the mud underneath. And in the mud they could see some stones. There are stones under there too? Duo Kong snatched the pole from Duoli and shoveled it into the mud. There really are. The stones covered in mud were lifted onto the table. Ignoring the stench of the mud, they wiped them with leaves and handed them to Xiaoxian. Are these yours too? Duoli asked. Xiaoxian took them and examined them. Then, in front of everyone, he held the muddy stone and activated his totemic power. The shamaness had said that they were all trustworthy people, so Xiaoxian wouldn't hide it from her. Plus, if everyone could have this skill, they would be able to produce more crystals. It would be a good thing for the flaming horns. Realizing what Xiaoxian was about to do, everyone stopped what they were doing and stared unblinkingly at the small stone in Xiaoxian's hand. They didn't want to miss anything. Even Guang Yi, who was usually serious, couldn't help but look curious. However, he wasn't interested in the stone in Xiaoxian's hand. Instead, he was interested in the totemic power around Xiaoxian. Xiaoxian came from another Yanjiao tribe. The fire seed was still there. Guang Yi was curious about the differences between the two tribes. Chapter 390. Squeak squeak. The sound of something falling to the ground was heard. The muddy stone in Xiaoxian's hand seemed to have been washed away by an invisible current. Starting from the top, the outer layer of the stone crumbled and fell along with the mud, revealing the smooth surface of the crystal. Duoli's eyes almost popped out. It looked like the crystal was wrapped inside the stone. As long as the stone was cut open, it could be seen. But he knew very well that if he cut open the stone, there would be nothing. The stone would even crumble into pieces. How is this possible? Duoli took the crystal from Xiaoxian's hand and looked at it closely. There was still some mud on the crystal. He wiped it off with his hand and covered it with an opaque animal skin bag. There was indeed light, but it was not very bright. We need to bask in the sun for a while, said Xiaoxian. Oh, okay, let's bask in the sun. Duoli held the stone and stood straight where there were the most yangguang. Xiaoxian couldn't stand it, so he said, just put it on the ground. After putting the stone where yangguang was, Xiaoxian told everyone to continue fishing for stones. They would leave immediately after they finished fishing. They could still make it back to the tribe before tonight. Knowing that this dry river was full of treasures, everyone became excited and sped up their actions. Xiaoxian told them about the drumming tribe and the water moonstones. It was the first time they heard such a story. Everyone thought it was very strange. Was it caused by the fire seed? If there is a tribe that can continuously produce water moonstones, there will only be one result, said Duo Kong. They will either perish or become slaves, added Guang Yi. That was why everyone would only say that they dug it out from the forest. They would never say that Xiaoxian made it. Everyone who knew about this was the same story. They scooped up more than 10 bags of stones back to the tribe. If it wasn't for the lack of bags and the lack of time to weave more bags, they would have scooped up more. After returning to the tribe, Xiaoxian washed the stone and told them about his experience in transforming the stone. After all, the power that transformed the stone came from the eggshell-shaped cover, and not from Yinjiao's totemic flames. The result was just as Xiaoxian had expected. No one else was able to change the stone no matter how hard they tried. Even if the shamans did it personally, the result would be the same. Totem power and legacy power were used one after another, but they were still ineffective. Everyone gave up after trying. The totem power fluctuation around Xiaoxian was different from theirs. It wasn't unfamiliar, but it wasn't familiar either. It felt strange, but it was something they couldn't do. With the shortcut closed, it was impossible for everyone not to be disappointed. How about this? If I have time, I'll make more. Even if I can't trade it with the slave masters, I can keep it for everyone to use, said Xiaoxian. The shamans shook their heads. Looking at Xiaoxian's tired face, they said, "Do what you can. No one knows if this transformation will harm you or not. In the past, without these crystals, everyone still lived well. It's fine." After everyone left, only Xiaoxian and the shamans were left. The shamans asked Xiaoxian how he felt. Other than being tired, were there any other injuries? Xiaoxian had just made 2 crystals. "I'm really fine. I'll be fine after some rest," said Xiaoxian confidently. "No matter what, you have to be careful," reminded the shamans. "Yes, I know." Back in his house, Xiaoxian looked at the big bag of stones on the ground and thought about what happened today. Other than him, no one else could successfully transform a stone into a stone. The power he possessed did not repel the totemic flames of the Flaming Horn tribe. It could also be used on the Rain tribe, the Drumming tribe, and even the slave masters. What kind of power was this? Xiaoxian didn't know. The only thing he was sure of was that it had something to do with the fire seed. Over the next 2 days, Xiaoxian tried to transform more than 10 crystals. Every time he found that the outer cover in his mind darkened, that was the limit. He stopped to rest, slept for a night, and was full of energy the next day. Compared to the beginning, Xiaoxian didn't feel as tired after transforming a single stone. He didn't see black after the transformation, but he couldn't take it anymore. These crystals needed to absorb Yangguang. They couldn't last as long as the Drumming tribe's water moonstones. These crystals could only last for 2 days after absorbing Yangguang. They would only continue to grow dimmer after absorbing Yangguang. Fortunately, there was no radiation, so it was harmless to humans. Xiaoxian didn't know how long this situation would last, but it definitely wouldn't last as long as the water moonstones. However, it was enough for daily use or to exchange for things. Soon it was time to go out. The list of people going out had already been announced. Many people wanted to go, but they still had to go through the review process. The tribe had 2 main requirements for people going out. First, don't cause trouble. For example, Chief Xiaoxian's younger brother, Zheng Cheng, who was the one who rashly pushed the door open on the first day of Xiaoxian's arrival. Zheng Luo directly excluded him. He was too rash and easily caused trouble, so they didn't let him go out for several years. Second, don't let weak people drag them down. There was also a certain danger when they went out. They might fight with other tribes or they might fight with the slave owners. Once the fight started, it would not be like hunting at home. The weaker ones would definitely drag them down. This was also for everyone's safety. The people in the tribe packed up 2 days in advance. Sheets of leather were folded and tied up. The people who went out helped carry the things entrusted to them by the people they knew. When the time came, they would bring back the things they exchanged for and distribute them. Xiaoxian was new here, so no one asked him to bring anything. He only brought a leather bag with crystals. Xiaoxian helped the people in the team carry some things. Xiaoxian caught up with the team. The team was led by Duokong and left the tribe. Every time they went out at the end of the year, it wasn't just a single tribe. It was possible that several tribes worked together. It was safer that way and they wouldn't be robbed. And Yinjiao's partner every time was the Taihe tribe. After all, there were only 2 tribes in the area. And they weren't enemies. Although they often had small fights, they could still work together occasionally. It was a win-win situation. Duokong brought a team of 100 people to the agreed meeting place with the Taiha tribe. The other side had already arrived, but they had slightly more people than the Yanjiao. After all, not every tribe was as strong as the Yanjiao people. Usually when the two tribes met, they would look at each other with disdain. They would never look at each other in the eye. But today was different. Both sides were quite friendly. Although they didn't express friendliness, they didn't mock each other either. As for the Taiha tribe's evaluation, the shaman had told Xiaoxian that the reason why the Yanjiao could get along with the Taiha tribe until now was because the Taiha tribe wouldn't stab them in the back. The Yanjiao people later took revenge on the tribes that had stabbed them in the back. They even forced a tribe that was originally nearby to leave. Only the Taiha tribe had cooperated until now. In the past 1,000 years, the two sides had even intermarried. Xiaoxian saw a few familiar faces in the Taiha tribe's team. They were the people he had beaten up when he was chasing the long-clawed monkey in the forest. When they saw Xiaoxian, they were already furious. When they saw Xiaoxian smiling at them, they gritted their teeth. "What the hell are you smiling at?" Chapter 391. The teams of the two tribes got along peacefully along the way. Occasionally, they only communicated with their eyes. At most, they bared their teeth and did not directly quarrel. Even those who had been holding their breath and staring at Xiaoxian did not directly get angry or provoke Xiaoxian. In both teams, everyone was very restrained, and those who did not know how to restrain themselves were not allowed to follow them out. The people of the Taiha tribe were sizing up Xiaoxian, a relatively unfamiliar companion. After all, every time they went out in the past, the candidates were about the same, and they did not change many people. Everyone was very familiar with each other. Even Guangyi could recognize some of them because he often saw them and got along for a long time. He could always remember some of their characteristics, not to mention the people of the Taiha tribe. However, the Yanjiao side did not pay attention to the Taiha tribe's sizing up eyes. As Duokong walked, he introduced Xiaoxian to Amba City, which they often went to. There were 6 major cities here, which once belonged to the 6 tribes of Ji, Chaoqiu, Yifeng, Mu and Amba. They were also the 6th largest tribes at the time. However, after the Ji tribe unified the other 5 tribes, the place where the Ji tribe was located was expanded several times to form the royal city. The descendants of the 6 tribes lived in the royal city, but the cities originally built by the other 5 tribes still existed. The Yanjiao people had also been to the royal city. Duokong told Xiaoxian that because they had caused trouble before, they had not gone to the royal city for a long time. Instead, they went to the nearest Amba city. As one of the 6 tribes, the people of Amba had not been idle after they embarked on the path of slave owners. Some of them followed into the royal city, while others stayed in Amba city to develop. At the same time, Amba city was also the largest concentration of tribal people living in this large area. There were also wanderers here, but the status of the wanderers here was not like the ones Xiaoxian had seen before. Because of the integration of the fire seed, their dependence on the tribe was much less. People became free and ambitious. Some people left the tribe to develop and become wanderers. Those who had the ability to leave the tribe and develop on their own were all extremely capable people. Otherwise, they would have been slaughtered long ago. From the tribe, with the speed of the Yanjiao people, it would take at least 3 to 5 days to reach Amba City. If the weather was good and they were lucky, the time would be shorter, but if they encountered trouble along the way, it would take even longer. This time, no one came looking for trouble. On the morning of the 4th day, the group arrived at the gate of Amba City. There were guards at the entrance of Amba City. Every team that entered the city had to hand over some items to them before they were allowed to pass. Xiaoxian saw that Duokong had already prepared 10 pieces of animal skin for the guards. Every 10 people had to hand in 1 piece, and it had to be of good quality. The man picked carefully, afraid that Duokong would give him something of inferior quality. After looking, the man's eyes circled around the bundle of animal skins on Duokong's back. He wanted to say something, but a few people came up beside Duokong. A dozen tall and strong Yanjiao people easily carried the large bundle of things. They moved their exposed muscular arms and grinned silently, revealing big white teeth. The gatekeeper didn't say anything. Thinking that these were Yanjiao people with bad tempers, he would definitely be the one to suffer if they made a fuss. After weighing the pros and cons, he could only give up. Everyone knew that the Yanjiao people dared to make trouble in the royal city. The Taiha tribe benefited because they were with the Yanjiao people and were not harassed. However, the teams that entered the city later were exploited miserably. The city was much larger than the cities in the desert, and the houses were neatly built. There were houses on both sides of the street that sold cloth, pottery, food, jewelry, and so on. Duokong said that more than half of the people there were wanderers. After entering the city, the group went straight to their destination, which was a relatively special area in Amba City. It was specially used by tribesmen who entered the city to trade. There were no fixed shops, so it was relatively free and more dangerous. Okay. Hurry up and find a place. Duokong waved his hand and said to the people behind him. There was no need to say more. The people behind him began to assign tasks. Some people put down the things they were carrying, and then like a forklift, they used brute force to shovel away the people in front of them, clearing an open space, and then began to set up tents. The tree trunks that had been cut down on the way were inserted into the ground, and the framework was set up. Large rolls of coarse linen were unfolded. There were many holes in many places, but no one cared as long as they could be used. The Taiha tribe set up next to the Yanjiao tribe. Looking at everyone's movements, they were very skilled and the division of labor was clear. After a few tents were set up, the group first unloaded the goods and put them inside, letting some people guard them. The other group took out a piece of animal skin and spread it on their arms, or put it on some simple shelves so that interested traders or slave owners in Amba City could better see it. Xiao Xian helped set up the tents and spread out the animal skins, then looked to the side. Although the Taiha people also brought some animal skins, they also brought some other things. The Taiha people knew a lot about herbs, so every time they came they would bring some herbs to sell. These sold faster than the animal skins. The people who were putting things over there saw Xiao Xian look over, and immediately put on a vigilant expression. Xiao Xian calmly looked away and looked at what other tribes were doing in other places. Most of the people around sold animal skins and bones, but there were also a variety of shiny crystals. The slave owners liked to use these raw materials to make things. Xiao Xian did not take out the glowing stones at the beginning. He intended to observe them first and then set the price. There were shouts all around, and in order to attract the attention of buyers, they all boasted about the things in their hands. This one said that he had the skin of an adult tiger in the mountains, and that one said that he had the skin of a cave lion king. In short, they had to attract the attention of others first. Although the Yanjiao people's voices were loud, it was a pity that they were too honest. The skin of an adult giant bear was not as attractive as the smaller bear skin from the opposite stall. They had just boasted that it was the skin of a bear king cub. But when they were touched and recognized that it was just the skin of an ordinary cave bear, they still quibbled. Some of the stones used to cushion the table and press the tents were kicked around, and one of them rolled to Xiao Xian's side. These were all ownerless items. Everyone picked them up from the ground, or people who came here before threw them down. They were all ordinary stones. Xiao Xian picked up the stone that rolled to his feet and looked at it. The stone was not good enough to be used as a tool. However, it could be used for other things. Thinking of something, Xiao Xian took out his tools, a small stone hammer made in the tribe and a small knife. Among the many shouts and quarrels around, a series of tinkling sounds seemed very abrupt. Some people looked in the direction of the sound, wanting to know what was making the sound, but they found that someone was actually knocking on the stone. Xiao Xian waved the small stone hammer in his hand quickly, while the other hand held the stone and kept turning it, knocking out the extra places. When the shape of the stone was not regular, it changed at a speed visible to the naked eye. What is that? It could be said that when gold and pottery were widely used, stone tools were always the easiest to ignore. So when they saw Xiao Xian playing with the stone, some of the merchants who came to see the animal skins suddenly became interested and gathered around to watch. One of them was particularly conspicuous. He was wearing a dark brown animal skin coat. His tall and burly body squeezed through the crowd and moved steadily, as if the surrounding crowd had no effect on him. His two big palms were like palm leaf fans. When he pushed, the people in front only felt layers of pressure rushing straight at them. Before they could react, they were already pushed away. Seeing that person, Duokang's eyes lit up. He turned his head and gave a look to the people behind him. Everyone quickly spread out the dark fur animal skins and placed them in the most conspicuous place. Chapter 392. Some people around also noticed the approaching big man. The people who were pushed aside wanted to curse, but when they saw the other party's appearance, they immediately swallowed the words that were about to come out of their mouths. Most of the people present knew this person. He was a traveling merchant and was quite famous. People called him Black Bear, which was very appropriate for his appearance, especially when he was wearing a thick brown and black animal skin coat. Combined with his strong and burly figure, he really looked like a black bear crossing the border. Pushed by the people around him, Black Bear's steps were heavy and steady as he approached Xiaoxian at an even speed. Xiaoxian didn't notice the movements of Black Bear and Duokang. At this time, his attention was already on the stone in his hand. He knew that some people had been attracted around him, and more than he expected. Originally, Xiaoxian only wanted to see if he could use the stone carving to attract a few traveling merchants who were looking at animal skins. Even if he couldn't attract them, when the stone carving was done, the carving could be placed here as an advertisement. There would always be people who would be curious. After all, no one around used this method. Xiaoxian's stone carving skills were trained by grinding stone tools. When Old Ka taught him, the requirements were quite strict. The subtle mistakes would be pointed out to Xiaoxian one by one, and then he would continue to polish and correct until there were no mistakes. Since the effect of attracting attention was better than expected, he had to be more serious. The general outline had been formed. Xiaoxian replaced the stone hammer and picked up the knife to continue carving again. Xiaoxian quickly got into the mood. The tinkling sound was gone, but everyone's attention was already on the stone in Xiaoxian's hand. With the flying stone chips and powder, a forest killer was taking shape. The traveling merchants had already left the hunting life. It had been passed down from generation to generation. Some of them had already stopped coming into contact with any large beasts and ferocious beasts. It was natural to feel strange to encounter such a stone carving. "This is a carving of a giant bear?" A Yinjiao person next to Xiaoxian cried out. When the word giant came out of his mouth, his pretentiousness immediately increased. At the same time, it also proved to others that they had indeed hunted a giant bear. How could they carve such a vivid image of a giant bear if they had never hunted one before? Although there were people who carved on bronze or other objects, they had never seen such lifelike stone carvings. This stone sculpture was very small, but one could feel the ferocity of a ferocious giant bear roaring in the deep mountains and forests. Before the stone sculpture was finished, someone asked, "How do we exchange for this stone sculpture?" Tribesmen usually asked to trade directly. Most of the people around were merchants, so they knew the tribesmen's requirements very well. Some people even took out a copper knife and wanted to use it to trade. When the others saw this, those who had the same idea also moved. They took out a knife that was slightly bigger than the person in front of them, and went directly to Duokang to negotiate. The people here were smart enough to know that the leader of the Flaming Horn tribe was Duokang, who was standing next to them. If they wanted to negotiate, they would have to talk to the person with the most authority. As for the kid sculpting, he had to listen to the leader. So, the people who thought they were smart directly targeted Duokang. Black Bear, who had already walked in front of Xiaoxian, did not speak. His eyes were fixed on the stone sculpture in Xiaoxian's hands that was about to be completed. A stone sculpture could transmit the sculptor's consciousness. Looking closely, Black Bear could see that this small stone sculpture was actually transmitting a wild and violent aura. It really was like a giant bear waving its giant paws and roaring in the forest. If Xiaoxian was carving other beasts, Black Bear would not be so serious. It couldn't be helped. Who told him to like bears? Their ancestors worshipped bears and worshipped the strength of bears, but at the same time, they also worshipped the warriors who hunted bears as fierce warriors. Now, the tribe had become a caravan, and they rarely had the opportunity to go into the forest to hunt giant bears. However, their obsession with bears was still passed down. The symbol of their caravan was the totem, the bear. From the moment he saw the stone sculpture in Xiaoxian's hands, Black Bear's eyes could not move away. "I want 20 pieces of animal skin," Black Bear said. Compared to the others who directly negotiated to buy the stone sculpture, Black Bear's words were more tactful. Duokong, who was chatting with a few people, heard this and immediately called for people to count the beast's skins. He even chose the best quality ones. Black Bear's reputation was not bad. No matter what his style was in other matters, at least he was very honest when it came to trading. He would not be stingy when it came to trading. There were large pieces of animal skin, but generally speaking, there was no need to specifically mention large pieces of animal skin. Basically, they were talking about small pieces of animal skin. Fearsome beasts were huge, and if a piece of animal skin was too big, it would not be easy to sell. Everyone bought it back to make clothes, so they did not need such a large piece. Therefore, there were small pieces of animal skin. As time passed, everyone formed a consensus. There was a fixed standard, and the size of the animal skin was similar. It was as if they had formed a set of quantitative units. The toll paid to the gatekeeper when they entered the city was a unit of cut animal skin. After the 20 pieces of animal skin were sorted out, Duokong had people stack them up and pass them to Black Bear. After checking the animal skin, Black Bear looked at Xiaoxian. "How about 20 pieces of animal skin and the stone sculpture for me? I can compensate for it with gold." The gold that people here talked about mostly referred to bronze, which was also the target of Yanjiao people. At this time, Xiaoxian's sculpture was just finished. Hearing Black Bear's words, Xiaoxian blew away the stone fragments on the stone sculpture and looked up at Black Bear. His eyes were calm as he said, 30 pieces. Black Bear's gaze went back and forth between Xiaoxian and Duokong. Then he looked away and nodded to Xiaoxian. "Okay, another 10. No, another 20 pieces. Bear skins are best. If you don't have any bear skins, then find something close to one." Duokong grinned and signaled to the people behind him to sort out another 10 pieces. While the others were sorting out the animal skins, Black Bear received the stone sculpture. He looked at it and was very satisfied. He carefully put it into a thick bag of fur that he carried with him. Then he pulled the rope of his coat, grabbed it with both hands, and opened the heavy coat to Xiaoxian, Duokong, and the others in a domineering manner. Black Bear's coat revealed large and small knives, swords, axes, and other bronze tools. Some of them were in the inner clothes, some of the bigger ones like axes and swords were in the waist, and some of the lighter ones were hanging in the inside of the coat. Xiaoxian. He cursed several times in his heart. No wonder Black Bear gave off such a strong sense of heaviness. It really was heavy. How could it not be heavy when carrying so many things? How was this a bear? It was practically a human weapon carrier. However, this also proved that Black Bear was indeed strong. To be able to carry so many things around every day and still live until now without enough strength, there was no way he could have survived. Duokang's eyes lit up. He looked at the objects of different colors and sizes. He raised his hand and pointed at a few of them. Some were big, some were small. How many things could be exchanged for 40 of those animal skins? And what quality they could be exchanged for, Duokong knew in his heart. When the two sides finished trading, the people around them started clamoring to trade with them. 5-10 pieces of animal skins were all bought. With Black Bear in front, they did not doubt the quality and origin of the animal skins that the Yanjiao people brought out. Everyone knew that Black Bear would not buy anything bad. Even if they did not know the Yanjiao people well, following Black Bear was definitely the right choice. They were not as extravagant as Black Bear, but with so many people, Duokong was already grinning from ear to ear. However, even if these people wanted more stone sculptures, it was already too late. In one day, almost half of the animal skins were sold. This made Duokong very happy. In the past, he might not have been able to sell so many in 5 days. Today, he managed to do it in 1 day. Sure enough, Elder Xiaoxian had a way. At this rate, they would be able to return in less than 10 days. At night, when they were huddled together in a simple tent to rest, Xiaoxian took the time to carve another stone sculpture. This time it was not a giant bear, but a different kind of fierce beast. For the next 2 days, Xiaoxian would take out a stone sculpture every day. Just like the first day, he would give them away if they bought more. For those who wanted to buy animal skins, this was very attractive. Although many people could not buy dozens of animal skins at once, they would still patronize the Yanjiao area for the sake of the stone sculpture. Those who bought a large number of animal skins to take away the stone sculptures were traveling merchants and people sent by the slave owners to buy them. On the fifth day, the animal skins brought by the Yanjiao people were almost sold out. Everyone did not have to keep an eye on the goods. After exchanging them for copper weapons, food and so on, they each took what they had and gathered together to exchange. The people of the Taiha tribe were quite envious. This time, because they had brought some relatively rare herbs, they were selling things much faster than before. But no one expected that Xiao Xian would appear in Yanjiao. Without a big order, Xiao Xian no longer carved. Seeing that there were not many things to sell in Yanjiao, he took out his own stones. For this reason, he had asked people to help look after them yesterday, and let these stones shine in the sun all day. Now, as long as he took them to a slightly darker place, he could see the obvious light on the stones. In the past few days, more and more tribesmen came to Amba City. The surroundings were full of shouting and quarreling, competing to see whose voice was louder and whose was louder. From time to time, people could be seen being sent flying. Xiao Xian did not compete with them in terms of voice. Instead, he made a wooden sign with words written in bright plant pigments. A new gem that glows in water sun stone. The drumming tribe's crystal stones were produced during the full moon, and were called water moon stones. Xiao Xian made this one to absorb the yangguang. So he changed the moon to sun. The wooden sign was supported by a long pole, and inserted next to it. There was no need to shout, just directly waiting for people to come. Xiao Xian had people turn the wooden sign every once in a while to change the direction so that people in other directions could also see the words on the wooden sign. New things were always full of attraction. Just now, there were tribesmen who were glad that Yanjiao was finally deserted. Who would have thought that not long after, they would see a large number of people rushing to Yanjiao? There was no way around it. It was just that the sign erected there was too eye-catching. Chapter 393. As soon as Xiao Xian took out the stone, it attracted a lot of people's attention. The words on the wooden sign were simple and clear, so many people didn't look at anything else and went straight to the Yanjiao area. What is it? It's glowing? It can't be nonsense, right? That seems to be the place where the Yanjiao tribe is. Their animal skins were selling well before. Let's go and see if it's real or fake. No matter what their opinions were, curiosity had already risen in their hearts. They would rather waste more time than miss out on any possible rare item. For the purchasers sent by the slave owners, if they brought back rare items, their superiors would be happy, and they could get a lot of benefits. For the merchants, after buying from the tribes, they could change places and resell to other slave owners, and they could still make a profit. On the Yanjiao side, the goods they brought were almost all sold. After Xiao Xian took out the crystal, more and more people gathered around, and they spontaneously protected him. Every year, there were many thieves who took advantage of the chaos to steal things, and they had to keep their eyes open. This time, Xiao Xian brought a total of 10 crystals, and now he only took out one. At this time, the weather was already cold, and many people were wearing large cloak-like animal skins. It was easy to check if the crystal was really glowing, and they just had to cover it with their own coats. But don't even think about stealing. There were so many eyes around, and as long as they saw the slightest sign, they wouldn't be able to take back their claws. One by one, people squeezed over with large animal skins that completely covered the light, and covered the crystal in Xiao Xian's hand with their large animal skins. Their eyes moved closer to look. In the dim field of vision, the small crystal emitted a clear light. Holding it, they could easily see the words in the dark. Without waiting for them to look, Xiao Xian had already taken back his hand and showed it to the next person. After looking at about 50 people, Xiao Xian put away the crystal and returned to his original position. He said to the crowd, "What do you think? Are you satisfied?" Some nodded while others remained silent. However, all of them stared at Xiao Xian with fiery eyes, waiting for him to continue. Xiao Xian didn't say anything. Duokong took over the mission, but he didn't tell the whole truth. He only said that they found this crystal when they were hunting fearsome beasts. They dug it out from the bottom of a river that was connected to the sea. This wasn't a lie. If that river had water, it would be bigger than the one in front of the tribe. It could be considered a big river, right? It was said that the river would flow to another bigger river, and then the bigger river would flow into the sea. This was not wrong. As for the total number of crystals, Duokong only said that there were 5. This was decided by Xiaoxian, Duokong, and the others last night. Unlike Xiaoxian, the people who often hung around here were no strangers to Duokong. Therefore, they believed that Duokong wasn't lying. At least he wouldn't lie completely. While Duokong was introducing the glowing crystals to everyone, Black Bear, who had been away for 3 days, was sitting in a stone house with a large yard in the city. He was holding a large ceramic bowl and gulping down meat soup. There was a large piece of barbecued meat on a plate next to him, which he finished in 2 or 3 bites. While Black Bear was eating, a big man hurriedly pushed open the door and came in. "Boss, the tribesmen have something again," the man shouted as he ran. Every year when the tribesmen came, they would bring some rare things. Although Black Bear had left, he still sent people to keep an eye on them. "Did something come out over there?" Black Bear wiped his mouth, put down the bowl and asked. The Yinjiao people brought out a glowing stone. "That stone really glows." "Really, I saw it with my own eyes." The big man was afraid that Black Bear wouldn't believe him, so he quickly assured him. "Yinjiao people again?" Black Bear muttered. He put on his coat, called his men and strode over. On the other side of the chaotic trading ground, Duokong had already explained the rules of the trade. They had also discussed it beforehand. They would use the auction mode, and 5 crystals would be auctioned together. This kind of crystal would definitely attract more attention. If they split the auction, the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for them. They might be able to get more benefits, but the risk was too great. It was better to end this quickly and leave as soon as possible. Duokong had already discussed it with the Taihe people. In order to let the Taihe people pack up early, Duokong had also given them some grains. Duokong took out a bronze sword that was as long as an arm. They had all been trading for a long time, so they could tell the value of this sword at a glance. Duokong used this as the starting price and let the others start bidding. 1 sword and a bag of grains. 2 swords. 2 swords and 5 animal skins. What, you don't want animal skins? Then let's have the grains. I promise they were just harvested this year. 2 swords and 10 bags of grains. 3 swords. Hearing the atmosphere getting hotter and hotter, and the bids getting higher and higher, Duokang's heart was blooming with joy. "Boss, should we also fight for it?" The people beside Black Bear were anxious. That kind of crystal, even if it was 5 bronze swords, it was still worth it. Once they reached the royal city, they just needed to resell and they could get even more. Black Bear's gaze swept over Xiaoxian and Duokong. He was about to call out a price when he heard an arrogant voice shout, "A bronze cauldron." Just as everyone was shouting with the unit of measurement that Duokong had given, a cauldron suddenly appeared in the midst of all the swords. It was very abrupt, like a group of pigs that suddenly screamed like a chicken being slaughtered. Whoosh! A path was forcibly broken through the crowd. 4 tall men with strong muscles opened the way in front, followed by a young man wearing a silver-gray animal skin coat. There were other people around him, and the most conspicuous one was the person standing next to him carrying a heavy object. Every step he took left a clear footprint on the ground, and his bulging meridians pulsed like dragons, as if he was withstanding an enormous pressure. On his back there was a heavy object wrapped in cloth. A cauldron? Everyone only felt the ground under their feet shaking with the other party's footsteps. Bang! The heavy cauldron was put down not far from Xiaoxian and Duokong. When it landed, it made a muffled sound with metal trembling. The people who heard it felt as if their hearts were shaken to their throats. That is, someone guessed the identity of the young man. To be able to appear in such an arrogant manner, it was naturally a slave owner in Amba City, and his status was not low. The young man who walked slowly raised his hand and swept the non-existent dust on his animal skin coat. In a tone of charity, he said to Xiaoxian and Duokong, "A copper cauldron. Don't you tribesmen like copper? I'll give you a cauldron, enough for you to make a lot of swords." Duokong almost spat out a mouthful of saliva. Listening to this tone, People who didn't know would really think that they could take advantage of it. How could a copper cauldron be the same as a cast sword? Do you really think that a copper cauldron can be easily made into another thing? Do you think we're easy to fool? When the other party pulled down the cloth, revealing the copper cauldron that reflected the dazzling light, many people present exclaimed, "Looking at it this way, this cauldron was really good. Hey, that's not right. Why are the 3 legs of this cauldron not the same length?" The triangular copper cauldron's 3 legs were too long and one was twisted. It was not stable on the ground, and the pattern on the copper cauldron looked blurry. Even part of the circular cauldron's body was sunken in. The slave owners here valued the cauldron very much. They used it as a ceremonial object, and certainly would not tolerate such a failure in their own homes. Now, this show-off actually took out an inferior product to bully people. What, did he think that he was giving charity to beggars and directly throwing trash? Yinjiao people didn't like slave owners. If you talked to them about strength, they would talk to you about class. If you talked to them about class, they would talk to you about class. They would never talk about the same topic. So the Yinjiao people didn't like slave owners who thought they were great. But the slave owners did have a lot of good things in their hands. There was a lot of technology and knowledge that they needed to learn. They admitted this and paid some price to learn and understand it. But it didn't mean that they were afraid of the slave owners. And when the slave owners looked at the Yinjiao people, they felt that the Yinjiao people were a group of troublemakers. They didn't listen to reason or force, and they were too damn stubborn. Unfortunately, this young master obviously didn't understand the style of the Yinjiao people. No exchange. We don't want the cauldron. We only want the swords and axes that have already been forged, Duokong said. He didn't expect to be rejected. The young man frowned and wasn't satisfied with Duokong's answer. You don't want it? We don't want the cauldron, Duokong confirmed again. The young man smiled, but there wasn't much of a smile in his eyes. Instead, there was a flash of darkness. You must have it. As the young man's last word fell, the person who had just put down the cauldron bent his arms and rushed forward. His arms, which seemed to have accumulated all his strength, were like ignited cannons. He pushed the cauldron on the ground towards Xiaoxian and Duokong. The cauldron, which was pushed up at high speed, flashed like a golden light. It left the ground and brought with it a biting cold wind and the chill of metal. It went straight for Xiaoxian, who was holding the crystal. Black Bear thought that Duokong would intervene. After all, in this kind of situation, usually the one who intervened was the leader of the group. They represented the entire tribe. Their opinion was the decision of the entire group. Fight or compromise, the onlookers thought to themselves. But to everyone's surprise, Duokong, who was standing closest to Xiaoxian, didn't make a move. He still stood in the same spot. Xiaoxian, who was facing the cauldron, lowered his waist and bent his knees. His whole body was like a mountain that was rooted to the ground. He raised one arm and pressed it against the cauldron. He actually chose to take it head-on. Bang! With the reverberation of heavy metal, it was as if a huge drum had suddenly been struck, producing a deafening sound wave. Even the golden light reflected by the 3-legged cauldron seemed to have been completely dispersed in that instant. The moment the sound rang out, everyone in the tribe's trading area was shocked. What happened? This was what those who didn't see what happened were thinking. What happened? This was the person who saw the whole thing but couldn't react. Black Bear's eyelids kept twitching. That kid actually took it head-on with one hand. Bang! There was another sound. This time it was different from the explosion of sound waves. This time it was the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. The body of the cauldron, which was almost as tall as a person, fell to the ground again. The surrounding soil and stones were shaken away. The dust was blown away by the wind, but the cauldron didn't move forward an inch. It stopped in front of Xiaoxian. Chapter 394. Because of the protection of his subordinates and several slaves, and Ping, who sat there with a proud posture, did not suffer much damage from the momentum. Only the sound just now hurt his ears. Pushing aside the people in front of him, and Ping frowned and looked at the person standing there like a mountain. He looked at the totem pattern on the other's body and seemed to have seen it before. but he couldn't remember. And Ping cursed his bad luck. Today was really unlucky. He went to check the goods early in the morning and brought back the pre-ordered cauldron. Who knew that there would be a mistake in the cauldron casting? In a fit of anger, he let the slaves around him carry the cauldron away, intending to find someone else to cast the cauldron. There were so many people in the family, why let an outsider cast the cauldron? What's more, it was cheaper to cast the cauldron himself. However, when he came out of the cauldron casting, he heard someone say that there were treasures in the free trade zone, so he brought people over. He wanted to exchange a useless cauldron for those treasures. Not only could he get rid of the failed product, but he could also show his generosity. If the other party did not give him face, he would use force. Who would have thought that such a situation would occur? What were the people around him saying? Yinjiao tribe. The name was a bit familiar. Meeting that pair of eyes, and Ping actually felt a sense of fear. And Ping had no choice but to look elsewhere, but his neck seemed to be particularly stiff when he turned around. Xiao Xian, who had been sitting there, had stood up because of the cauldron. At this time, the hand that blocked the cauldron was still on the body of the cauldron. His feet were apart, his knees were propped up, and his body was slightly crouched. He stood there steadily, giving people the feeling that a sleeping beast had opened its eyes after being provoked. Savage like a beast, this was the evaluation of the people of Amba City who lived in remote places. The Yinjiao tribe in front of him was also the same in Ping's heart. And in Ping's eyes, the moment this savage beast woke up, a powerful aura erupted from its body. That was not the power that an ordinary savage beast could produce. That ferocious aura that rampaged just now was something that no one present could ignore, no matter how slow they were. Tricky. That was Ping's thought at the moment. After the silence, there was a burst of noise. They thought that the person in charge here was Duokong. Even if it wasn't Duokong, it would be Guang Yi. They didn't expect it to be the young man who took out the gem. Who is that person? Are all the young people in Yinjiao so powerful? Look at that city guy's expression. I wonder if the two sides will really start fighting. It's good to fight. We can take advantage of the opportunity to pick up some good stuff. I heard that the Yinjiao people got a lot of good stuff these days. Although many people had other thoughts, they knew to keep their voices down and not say it out loud. They just kept their eyes fixed on the movements on the field, waiting for the opportunity to explode. And Ping's eyelids trembled slightly. For a moment he really didn't know what to say. The people around Ping rolled their eyes and immediately seized the opportunity to stand up, wanting to leave a good impression in front of Ping. He took a step forward and pointed his finger at Xiao Xian and the others. He raised his chin and said, "What? Do you want to be enemies with the 6 tribes of Amba?" Because they used to belong to one of the 6 strongest tribes, even if they were later merged and subdued, the people of the Amba tribe, who were now the people of An City, still liked to call themselves the 6 tribes of Amba. This way, they would have face and satisfy their vanity. Unfortunately for the Yinjiao people, it didn't matter if you were from the 6 tribes of Amba or the 7 tribes of Amba. If you stepped on our bottom line, don't blame us for fighting back. Xiao Xian looked at the other side calmly and said, "I heard that you 6 tribes of Amba like cauldrons. We'd better not take what you love. This cauldron is yours." It was clearly an ordinary-looking hand. Compared to the enormous cauldron, it was so tiny. However, the scene from before gave people the feeling that the entire cauldron was enveloped by this hand. This moment it was the same. Bang! As the hand on the cauldron retracted and slapped, there was another sound of metal trembling. It was heavy with a high-pitched sound and unrestrained murderous intent. Once again it resounded throughout the entire free trade zone. The cauldron, reflecting the golden light of the sun, turned into a stream of light and flew straight to the person who had just jumped out. The cauldron flew so fast that the person who had just jumped out couldn't avoid it at all. Under the collision, the skin on the surface of the person's body seemed to suddenly split open, bursting out several bloody marks. Blood splashed from the cracks, and the sound of broken arm bones and sternum was completely suppressed by the sound made by the cauldron. All the people around saw was the figure of the person who flew out upside down with blood spurting out. When he fell to the ground, there was a long trail of blood. The cauldron fell to the ground. Because the 3 feet were uneven, it couldn't be stabilized. After landing, It buzzed and swayed several times before standing crookedly. At this time, the flaws of the cauldron were completely exposed. Black Bear looked at the crooked cauldron with contempt in his eyes. They didn't even bother to look at this kind of thing. As for the idiot who took out this thing and wanted to force a trade, he deserved to be slapped in the face. Not only Black Bear, but even the others who were thinking about how to pick up the scraps secretly felt that this was a good slap in the face. Did they really think that their tribesmen's eyelids were shallow, and that they could be dealt with by a little broken thing? Although the onlookers retreated a little further, as if they wanted to stay away from the battlefield, they didn't really leave. They didn't mind watching a show. Moreover, for most of the tribesmen here, they usually gave face to the people surnamed in an Amba city, but they weren't really afraid of them. Naturally, they were happy to see the Yinjiao people humiliate the ants. Anyway, this matter didn't involve them. On the other side, seeing his subordinates on the ground, and Ping's expression twisted. This was a provocation. A provocation to the authority of Amba City. Unable to sit still any longer, and Ping suddenly stood up and waved his hand. Beat them. After a pause, he added, "Get those glowing stones back for me." After receiving the order, several figures around and Ping rushed straight to Xiao Xian. But this time Xiao Xian didn't move. When the other side rushed over, several figures also rushed out from his side and behind him. Duo Kong and Guang Yi rushed to the front. Did they think they were dead? If they all relied on Xiao Xian to fight alone, they would be scolded by the shaman and chief when they returned. There was the sound of metal clashing, as well as the collision of bones and muscles. Fists and feet collided, and with the sound of bones breaking, a figure smashed to the ground. Puff 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 puff. Another sound of people falling to the ground rang out one after another. And Ping's twisted face became even more ferocious with these sounds. But he didn't have the guts to fight personally. After smashing the last person who rushed out to the ground, Duo Kong and the others returned to their own camp and stood around Xiao Xian. Duo Kong took out an axe that he had exchanged not long ago and threw it to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian caught the axe and turned the handle between his fingers. Then he held the handle firmly in his palm and looked at An Ping and the others not far away. Without the paint, the flame-like totemic patterns on their bodies were fully displayed. If there was only one beast that had just woken up from a deep slumber, now there was a group of beasts. The aura of 100 people was almost twisted together like a burning axe, ready to break through all obstacles. Strong, fearless. Even the bystanders who had retreated could feel the pressure clearly. You have your untouchable status. I have my overbearing and unreasonable ways. Don't try to reason with me. In the free trade area, the first person to break the rules has no right to talk about reason. No matter what, the Yinjiao people's bottom line was always very clear. You want something? Alright, just do as we say. Take out as much as you need, not a single one less. Otherwise, we'll beat you up. There was a sense of anxiety in the air. Even the onlookers didn't dare to make a noise. At this time, a clear voice suddenly came from outside the crowd. What's going on? As the voice fell, the crowd parted to form a path. Unlike in Ping, the person who appeared at this time wasn't so ostentatious, but he was more eye-catching. Many of the tribesmen in the trading area knew him. And Ping gave people a sense of vanity, but the person who appeared at this time had a noble aura. This was a member of the main bloodline of An City. Hearing the voice, An Ping's face suddenly changed. He put away his other expressions, and his eyes were filled with panic and fear. But thinking about it, what did he do wrong? How could the tribesmen not be willing to take advantage of him? Thinking of this, An Ping quickly walked towards that person. Seeing the other person's gaze, An Ping shrank his neck and continued to complain. The first thing he said was, "Those barbarians," not only the Yinjiao people, but also many of the tribesmen who were watching the show, raised their eyebrows. Barbarians? At least I abide by the basic rules here. What about you guys? Do you think I won't show you how barbaric I am? And Yin stood there quietly, listening to An Ping's complaint. His expression didn't change and he didn't interrupt. Instead, he stretched out his palm. It didn't seem to have any offensive power, but when it hit An Ping's body, An Ping directly spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out. The crowd watching the show hurriedly made way for An Ping to fall directly to the ground. If it weren't for An Yen here, they would have stepped on him a few more times. An Yen looked down on what An Ping did. He only felt that how could An City raise such an idiot? Fortunately, they were in charge of this branch. As for the other branches An Ping belonged to, those who could raise idiots were naturally a bunch of idiots and trash. An Yen looked down on them even more. An Yen knew that the tribesmen in the trading area were angry, so he simply used An Ping to appease the tribesmen in the trading area. Looking at the people around him, sure enough, after seeing An Ping get beaten, the anger on their faces faded a lot. Looking around with a faint smile, An Yen said in a clear voice, "My An City also follows the rules. Since we provide a place for everyone to trade, naturally we will abide by these rules." After he finished speaking, he looked at Xiao Xian and the others. He waved his hand to have people bring over a large box. An Yen said, "That crystal stone, I will pay 5 swords and 5 bags of grains. Is there anyone else who wants to increase the price?" The surroundings were quiet. Even if they weren't convinced after thinking about it, they still gave up. First of all, they really couldn't afford the price An City offered. Second of all, they didn't want to compete with the young master of An City. This young master still followed the rules, so they also gave him face. Black Bear's eyes flashed with ridicule when no one was paying attention. Rules? Rules my ass. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.